Hello everyone, this is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Uzumaki Rewrote Fate with Time Powers and Tsuchi by his side, Part 1. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. He ducked his head deftly, allowing the spitball from behind him to go over his head and land on someone else. Wah! Who did that? Naruto's face was that of a person who was bored out of his mind. He used his thumb and pointed it behind him lazily. Kiba did it. Sakura got up from her place beside the Uchiha, stomped up the space between the rows of students until she was beside the blonde boy who looked very disinterested still. Without warning, she proceeded to give the Uzumaki a knuckle sandwich. Attempted to. Naruto simply leaned back and the rosette's knuckled hand struck the desk with a loud thud. The girl yelped and pulled her hand back sharply and placed the back of it against her mouth to suck on it in an effort to dull the pain. Naruto nearly sighed long enough to deflate. She had never hit him yet, and the way things were going, she never will. This time around, she couldn't complain that he let her hit the desk by trying to hit him. That was dumb. In the back of his mind though, he could only muse about how old this was getting. Really, really old. Do you think I'm an idiot? Stop lying. It came from your direction. The girl shrieked in a small effort to regain some composure and respect. I said it was the Inuzuka. But I don't care if you believe me or not. Just leave me alone, the boy said with a roll of his eyes. The girl huffed and went back to her seat crossly, upset that her attempt at some justice went unfruitful. Everyone was minding their own business. This was nothing new. It was a constant that Kiba would try to prank Naruto, but it never worked. In fact, Naruto was never surprised. If the worst came to worst, and it usually did, someone else would get it instead. Naruto was an enigma. He never got caught. He never got surprised or frightened. He always told the truth, never lying. Above all, he was never lazy, just bored, emanating utter disinterest in everything that took place around him. There was something to him that no one knew. Iruka came into the classroom and conducted the daily lesson as usual. He wrote on the chalkboard and gave his lectures. And as expected, as Naruto had done every day, he took notes of all that was taught, being a teacher's dream of a perfect listening student. As 3 p.m. struck, everyone filed outside to the Taijutsu mat, today being Friday. It tended to take place on Friday, so if and when they got injured they could heal over the weekend and be well enough to return to school come the following Monday. Today was no different. The students gathered around the large square mat under the expansive shade of the 2 large trees that grew nearby. It was slightly padded to soften landings when the students fought each other. Anything else, one could say it was unusually smooth. It was said that this was to promote better fighting capabilities in slippery places, but it was a well-known fact the mat was replacing a coarser version after Kiba had practically sanded off someone's face on it when he was angry one day. The victimized boy is now going to a civilian school these days. 27 students stood around, crowding the mat while waiting. As expected, Iruka made his way through the students and stood at the center of the mat, waiting on the students to settle down. They soon did, knowing that the sooner they got this out of the way, the sooner they could go home and do whatever they pleased for 2 days. All right, it's time for Taijutsu, Iruka announced, looking over the students. It will be between those as I see fit. I won't pit weaker students against someone who's excellent in it, as usual. But be prepared for next week. You all know that the Genin exams are next week, and if you know you need some extra work, then do it. I'll let free challenges go first. After that, I'll tell you who goes against whom. The civilians challenged each other and made some small bets on the side on who would win. All too soon, it was the rookies, colorful people remaining. Those were Shino Aburame, Choji Akamichi, Ino Yamenka, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Shikamaru Nara, and Naruto Uzumaki. The 9 did not make a move to challenge each other. They were the best in the class and they all knew who was the best in Taijutsu. It was the pecking order. It was almost as if they had their own society and social classes, and each knew who they could beat, who they could match in strength, and who they would lose against. Iruka knew this as well as them, and explained why they waited. There were 9 of them. It was inevitable that one wouldn't fight or they would fight twice. Iruka would match them up so it would be fair, in a way. Hyuga Hinata and Yamanaka Ino. Iruka stated to the crowd, almost as an order. The two aspiring kunoichis came to the mat and bowed to each other. Naruto closed his eyes. They'll run to each other, Ino being faster because she has more confidence. Ino will try to punch Hinata's right cheek but then she'll deflect it with her left hand and hold onto it. Hinata will feint a tenketsu jab at Ino's throat but when the Yamanaka tries to avoid that, Hinata will disable Ino's captured arm with a jab at the shoulder. Because it's so painful to her, she'll forfeit. Hinata will apologize a lot while blushing before fixing her arm and then Sasuke and I will fight. Naruto opened his eyes to watch what he had thought play out before Iruka called out again. Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. HN. Forfeit. The class started laughing at Naruto, Sakura being the loudest. He's afraid of Sasuke-kun. She catcalled with other students in agreement. I don't have to prove anything to any of you, he grumbled in a bored tone. Somehow, the low volume of his speech rose over the din of the laughter. His tone was a real buzz-kill. The laughter ceased. The Uchiha smirked slightly. He's got the right idea. Everyone here is substandard. The only people here up to par are him and the Aburame, and Kiba. Maybe Shikamaru on a good day. The class continued with Shino beating Sakura a bit badly, Shikamaru forfeiting to Choji. Kiba practically destroyed another civilian learner when Iruka called it quits. The students thought he probably did so before he could get into trouble for letting a sparring fight go too far. Alright. That's enough, class. You may leave. The students dispersed, going in separate directions to depart for their homes. Iruka beckoned to Sakura and the student who lost to Kiba to follow him to the academy's nurse to patch them up. Best friends paired up. Clan heads and orphans went solo and soon, the area was empty of people. X equals X equals. The Uzumaki walked along the roadway, noticing the passers-by parting to give him way as to not let the boy even rub on them when they passed. Pretending to not care, he instead looked to the sky in the west before he hurried to his destination. After a brief time of speed walking, his countenance improved when he saw the ramen shop. He quickly parted the privacy flaps before he seated himself on his stool of frequent choice gratefully. Tsuki Oja-san. Ayame ni-chan. He yelled in the seemingly empty ramen stand. Naruto ni. Came the reply that sounded distant. Coming. A minute later brunette girl with dark eyes and appeared to be in her late teens came out in a white waitress uniform. Hey. Naruto ni. Ayame said cheerfully. Ayame ni-chan, he greeted in kind. Doing well. Doing well. But, Two-san isn't too up to it today. Her bright countenance darkened a little. The Uzumaki leaned over the counter conspiratorially and Ayame mirrored the action, with Naruto whispering into her ear. Did you stop him? He whispered discreetly. Yeah, I accidentally burned him badly on his foot so he didn't come to work. So do you know if? He trailed off. Thankfully. No, I heard an Anbu arrested them at midday. They were waiting at the corner. Did you tip off the Anbu or something? The boy asked. No, it was just by chance. Naruto leaned back on his stool. So all is well. That's great news. Except Dad's leg. He's getting some treatment later at the hospital. He could be here tomorrow or the day after. So, I guess it worked out. His face adopted an even look. It's the least I could do. No, it's a good thing you told me early this morning. You could knock a little quieter. Nearly gave me a heart attack. Next time say something while I'm still awake, huh? The girl started chuckling. Hopefully there won't be a next time. He frowned, deep in thought. Her mood soured as well when she thought of her father, getting attacked by the hoodlums at the end of his block. He could have been killed, just like that. We take life for granted. He looked up and saw her face and tried to lighten the gloom that had settled over them. Well, how's about some ramen, huh? I'm starving. She sensed what he was trying to do and smiled a bit as well. Yeah, we have cause for a celebration. This time, we'll both have it. The boy announced that he could treat them both, and that got a laugh from the ramen mistress. It'd be a first. Sure. Why not? Easier on the cash flow. She wandered into the kitchen and came back 5 minutes later with 2 large bowls of ramen, one pork and the other vegetable with red peas. She set the pork in front of her customer and the other beside his own. She then came to the other side of the counter where her bowl was and sat beside Naruto. With a quiet sounding "Itadakimasu," the pair began to eat in silent contemplation. They had much to be thankful for. X equals X equals. Naruto could be found doing sit-ups in his apartment, trying his utmost at one more but failed. He sprawled upon the ground, panting heavily and sweating profusely. Damn. 300's my limit. Now for push-ups. He rolled over onto his chest and started doing push-ups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As he finished somewhere in the low 200 bracket, he collapsed onto his chest, arms feeling like worn rubber. His stamina and biceps had failed him before he could struggle to get another one done. He sighed in resignation. Sit-ups must have drained me. He reached to a nearby chair and pulled himself to his feet before removing the towel laid over the chair's back. He mopped his face with it and wiped his bare upper torso before balling it up and tossing it into the open dirty hamper. It made it inside rimlessly and the boy did a small fist pump in pride. He then made his way to the bathroom to shower and clean himself up. His shower was quick and he was in bed, promptly at 6 p.m. Soon after, he was asleep, tired from his exercise. The boy was anxious to get to bed and rest, eager to get the day over with. At the Hokage's office, a man dressed in red and white robes with a kite-shaped hat with the kanji for fire on it turned off his crystal ball that was focused on Naruto Uzumaki. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, the professor, the god of the shinobi, ceased his monitoring of his grandson. He was not related by blood. Rather, they were related by the close bond they shared. It was one of solidarity. Or at least, the old man hoped they still had that. Hiruzen felt like he and the boy had been growing apart for years now. There used to be that wonderful feeling of companionship when the boy was younger. But they started growing apart 3 years ago when the boy turned 10. They were still close, depending on whose opinion you asked for, but not by the older man's standards. Naruto used to be more casual with him, calling him old man and all that. But now, while he called him so now and again, Naruto started behaving more formally. Of late, he had kept a vigil on him, trying to figure out the blonde. There was nothing unusual about him. He was almost completely normal. Almost being the keyword. Naruto seemed too normal, which in itself was abnormal. He ate at the same time every day, always got around 80% in his academics, and being slightly above average everywhere else, exercised shortly before bed, and he always went to sleep early. This was as normal could get, but for Naruto, he was anything but the sort. Anbu. A ninja wearing an animal mask depicting a boar materialized in front of his desk, at full attention. Boar. Watch Naruto Uzumaki until sunrise. Inwardly, the Anbu sighed. He just had to be the one to get the most unremarkable duty in the world. X equals X equals. It had been a week, and all the students assembled in their classroom promptly at 9. Today were the Genin exams and all were nervous, anxious to get it over with. The lesser confident could be seen still studying and the proud were seated, hands crossed. Iruka's class was certainly one that had its own order of society. Naruto had bags under his eyes, indicating a lack of sleep. He had probably spent most of his night studying and training, neglecting to rest his body. The orange jumpsuited boy's head was sagging down while he struggled to stay awake. His body finally gave out and he dozed off, head down on his desk. He slept for an hour which, if he was fortunate enough, would be enough for his revitalizing stamina. At 10 a.m., Iruka and Mizuki walked in, papers in hand. All right, everyone prepare for the test. The 2 Chunin teachers stood in front of the class, scrutinizing them. I want you to do your best, and no cheating. Mizuki saw a certain blonde who was apparently sleeping. Someone wake Naruto. Sakura, whose seat placement was beside the Uzumaki, saw this as a golden opportunity, cracked her knuckles. She was about to rap her fist against the sleeping boy's head when the boy woke up with a deep gasp and grabbed her hand at the wrist. 1 hour. He all but screamed at the top of his lungs as he looked around wildly before getting his bearings together. He was stared at by the class, giving him unnerving expressions, but the teachers were not amused. Naruto, prepare for the exam. You shouldn't be sleeping at a time like this. Iruka stated sternly while his fellow Chunin nodding in agreement. The Uzumaki regained his usual, bored to hell, demeanor before his eyes closed, tempted to keep that way. Hi, Iruka-sensei. Iruka nodded once to the boy. All right. Mizuki, help me hand these out. He gestured to the tests. I'll take this half of the class and you take the other half. The two men walked into the center aisle and started handing out the tests from the front to the back and from back to the front, working their way to the far ends of the room. When they had completed their task, they made their announcement. Begin. He took up his pen and wrote in his name. Suddenly, he squinted at the paper, inspecting it in deep scrutiny. It seemed fine, but something felt off. Looking around to the teachers to see if any were looking at him, but fortunately, they weren't. He placed his pen back on the paper to ensure that it would not blow away before bringing his hands together under his desk. He formed the ram seal under the desk and very lightly performed the genjutsu release. Kai, he muttered under his breath. The paper rippled and suddenly, it was shown to have been upside down. This was made clear when he saw that he had written his name where the bottom of the page was. He shook his head as he retook his pen and crossed it out with a straight line. Pretty sneaky genjutsu. All my answers would have been written upside down and in all the wrong places. He turned the paper around, wrote in his name on the proper line, and started to do his test correctly. Who could have done it? Was it Mizuki? He gave me my test. It also could have been during the preparation, while it was being made, someone cast the genjutsu then placed it upside down in the stack. Was it meant for me then? Or someone else? He looked around at the teachers. Mizuki was looking at the Nara who was sleeping, presumably already finished with his test. Iruka met Naruto's eyes, both staring. Finally, they broke it off and both returned to their respective tasks. Nah. They handed out the papers in a particular order. And all our seats were prearranged for the test from the start. I am sitting in 6th place. It would have been a simple thing to just put my paper 6th from the top, so I got that paper. He put in another answer. One of these teachers, if not both, are out to get me or botch my chances for passing or something. He purposefully put in a wrong answer at the next question. Okay, one more incorrect answer and put in the rest right. He finished his test easily and put his head down on the desk. He remained in deep thought as paranoia started to plague him. After half an hour later, the teachers announced the exam's end and took all the papers before Iruka walked off with them into the back room. He soon returned and shouted at Shikamaru to wake up. After the boy was rudely awakened, or so the Nara himself complained, Mizuki told them to file outside to the Taijutsu mat and the aspiring Genin all complied with the order. At the Taijutsu mat, they all grouped around it with the teachers at the center, waiting for them to speak. When they were assured that they had settled, Mizuki began to speak. This year, the academy is doing something different. Normally, the students would fight each other in taijutsu or even the teachers, but we have found it more reasonable to do the testing in another fashion. This year, you bunch will fight a Jonin. What? How the hell are we supposed to fight a Jonin? A boy shouted. Most of the other students, particularly the civilian-born ninjas, mumbled and whispered in agreement. Quiet, Iruka shouted. Just listen. When we're done explaining, you'll understand. The students fell silent while someone coughed somewhere in the back. The Chunin instructor started to speak again. It was noticed that students of different strengths fighting would give the stronger an unfair advantage. Like when Kiba took down Roanna last week, someone hissed to another. Who said that? Iruka said angrily. Getting no answer, he continued. Also, you're all aspiring genin. In the past when you fought Chunin instructors, we didn't expect you to win, because us Chunin have strength, skill, height, and weight classes above yours. Kiba at the front raised his hand. But this Jonin will be an adult, right? Not much of a difference. Why not just you guys after all, Iruka-sensei? Not the case, Inuzuka, Mizuki spoke up. He's 14 and he's your average size. Said teenage Junin came into being out of a swirl of leaves. He was, as mentioned, their height, but he was in Anbu uniform and wore a blank mask that had the kanji for leaf on the forehead. This is the bunch, correct? He asked. Yes, Yumino replied, not perturbed for a second. But do you think it is fair to fight with armor? He removed his armor pads and it was discovered that he was wearing a brown vest underneath. He then gave his armor to Mizuki, who strode to the edge of the mat with it and placed it out of easy reach. He will fight you one at a time alphabetically. When he's done with each person, he'll announce your grade, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest, the scarred Chunin announced. Any other concerns? What about his mask? Naruto asked, trying to look over the crowd of students. With the mask on, we can't go for face hits. It's still like armor, not flesh. The Anbu Junin performed 3 hand seals in a blur and removed his mask slowly. When he looked up, most of the students gasped. His face is blank. Sakura shrieked. A civilian puked to one side before Naruto spoke up again. For the love of Kami, calm down. It must just be a very strong genjutsu. He obviously isn't allowed to show his face. The aspiring genin looked ashamed for a minute before the Anbu spoke up. I'm ready. Who's the first? The Aburame walked up to the mat. That would be me, Anbu-san. Mizuki and Iruka nodded before the Yumino took out his marking sheet. You may begin. The Anbu dashed to Shino with low speeds, bringing himself to fight closer to a genin's level. Almost mechanically, he sent a punch to the Aburame's gut. The glasses-wearing boy sucked his gut in as the punch got him and grabbed the teenager's arm and wrenched it. The Anbu simply went with the arm-wrenching motion and did a roundhouse kick at the Aburame's head. The boy had to release the arm to block his head. Without letting up for a second, the Anbu leapt up with his remaining foot and kicked Shino in the chest. Shino fell to his back and the Anbu righted himself in the air and landed neatly on his own 2 feet. Shino got up quickly and charged the Anbu. Feint kicking with his left knee, he finished with a full-on waist-sweeping kick. The Anbu was prepared for the action and he caught the leg at the knee and twisted the foot savagely. Shino went with the motion and fell to the ground on his front. The Anbu thought for a while. His juniors were weaker than him, of course, and this was his first grading. Were they all better than this, or worse? Was this standard? This could be rectified later, but you'll have an 8. The Anbu dropped the foot and the Aburame started to get to his feet a little shakily. The Anbu held out his hand and Shino took it and heaved himself up. He bowed his head at the Anbu who reciprocated. Shino then walked back to his place under the tree before he sat down. Next, the Anbu said. All the civilian ninja students went one right after another. They all got scores going from 2 to 5. Choji got 7 when his leg started to get twisted before he gave up. Sakura got 6. She quit when she got caught in a painful arm lock. Hinata went next and got a 7 before he got inside her guard, grabbed both of her hands, and kicked away her legs at the ankles. Kiba went in soon after and got a 9. He got pinned under the Anbu's weight with his arm bent behind him, wrist touching his upper back. Shikamaru put in a little effort into his bout and got a 6 when the Anbu swept his legs out from under him. Civilians went again now. This time, they were fewer of them, so Sasuke didn't have long to wait. The Uchiha smirked to himself. It would be a boon to get a chance to test his prowess and how much he'd grown against an Anbu. If he was this young, this Anbu must have an extraordinary amount of talent and skills. He was probably holding himself back so much it wasn't even funny. Like, Itachi. Alright, Uchiha Sasuke, you're up next. Iruka ordered. About time. He walked up to the mat, ignoring the squeals of his fangirls. He stood across from the Anbu and observed him. Huh, that faceless thing he has going on feels intimidating. No wonder the civilians' scores are so pathetic. They must have been scared to touch him. He entered the stance for the interceptor fist created by his clan and waited. Hajime. Mizuki announced. Both teens ran at each other quickly to strike at the other. The Anbu, being faster, crossed the halfway point first and reached the Uchiha. He used his acquired momentum and sent a blurred fist at Sasuke. The boy countered it by grabbing it at the wrist with his left hand and pulled the Anbu forward. In the same motion, he attempted to elbow the Anbu in the invisible nose, pulling him into it. The Anbu was prepared and ducked it, bending his head backward. The elder then planted his left leg behind the Uchiha and pulled him along with him, tripping Sasuke backward. The boy started to fall but kept his grip on the Anbu's wrist and both ended up falling together. The Anbu wrenched his hand back from Sasuke the moment they both hit the floor. He was counting on the fact that when they dropped, the Uchiha's grip would be lessened so he could reclaim his own hand. Both fighters rolled away from each other and got back to their feet quickly. Sasuke, seeing that the Anbu's speed was greater, settled for defending, so when the Anbu threw a punch feint, he was prepared for the thrusting shin kick the Anbu intended to carry out. He simply moved his foot out of the way and kicked away the Anbu's leg right in the calf, driving it with the front of his sandal. The teenager sucked his breath in sharply in pain. Not wasting a valuable opportunity, Sasuke sent a punch to the Anbu's solar plexus, but he raised his guard in time. Not yet done, however, Sasuke dealt a rabbit punch through it that caught him in the chest. The Anbu stepped backward as the punch caught him, lessening the hurt from the blow. The fight went on for a bit longer, and Sasuke's stamina waned. Noticing it, the Anbu decided to stop the fight before it lowered the boy's performance and ending score. "I've seen enough." 9, the Anbu said, and dropped Abarame's score to 7. Sasuke smirked as he dropped his stance. He bowed head and shoulders to his opponent, and the Anbu reciprocated the action. Sasuke strode off the mat, the only one so far to leave it without injury or suffering a tap-out constraint. Iruka wrote the number 9 next to Sasuke's name. His eyes then moved down one place to glance at the next name. All right. Up next, Uzumaki Naruto. The blonde had retreated to the back of the group during the earlier fights. When the crowd of students parted to give him way, Iruka saw the boy sitting on the ground, fidgeting with his hands. He slowly opened his eyes and stood up and stretched, joints cracking. Yeah, I'm coming. He strode between the students and stepped on the mat, facing the Anbu who had already moved back to his place. Wonder if the fight will show me if I can do anything wrong. He whispered. The Anbu barely heard him, but he nodded. Both fighters settled into their stances. The Anbu in a sort of loose Chunin stance, while for Naruto's stance, he stood sideways to the Junin, positioning his left foot facing forward towards him with his right foot behind him, pointing to the right. It seemed reminiscent of Sasuke's stance but looser. No, it was more baited, as if he was confident he could dodge and punish anything. The Anbu studied the stance. He had never seen it before. It made him want to challenge it. Hajime. Mizuki started the match. As usual, the Anbu made the first move and charged, but Naruto didn't even move as he approached him. The faceless teen threw a right hook to Naruto's jaw, but in an instant, Naruto's hand rose and pulled it down, wrenching it towards the ground. Not done, he brought up his knee to smash it into the Anbu's chest, still keeping his grip on the arm to make sure the Anbu didn't try to lessen the impact. The teenager merely blocked the knee with his other arm. The Uzumaki released the arm, and as soon as the Anbu stood up straight, he made a full 360-degree turn and roundhouse kicked the Anbu in the neck. The Jonin almost gave a bored vibe as he caught the foot at the ankle with both hands and twisted it. Naruto leapt off the ground with his other leg and went with the twist, now in midair with his back facing the sky. He now used his hopping leg and kicked the Anbu in the chest, pushing him backward from the force, making him let go. Legs now free, he half-curled himself and landed on the ground head and shoulders first, performing a perfect PK roll. Standing back up quickly, he ran at the Anbu, still getting back up. He kicked his elder in the shin of his right leg with a thrusting kick. He dropped and sweep-kicked his left leg and the Anbu fell back down again. He then proceeded to try and stamp the Anbu in the gut, but the Anbu rolled away from it, barely dodging it. When he was still in the roll, the instant he rolled onto his stomach the second time, he pushed off with his hands and feet forcefully, getting back up quickly. Naruto ceased going after him and resumed his stance. The Anbu seemed to hesitate a little, realizing the boy's stance and its punishing nature before he charged the Uzumaki again, running with his weight close to the ground. He made a knee feint at the blonde, but Naruto merely stepped backward a couple of times. By the time the Anbu had abandoned the feint and finished with a full-on leg kick, Naruto wasn't in that space anymore. The boy grabbed the foot of his oppressor and took a move from Sasuke. He kicked the Anbu in the thigh with the front of his sandal, driving upwards. As the Anbu flinched in pain, Naruto used his free arm and elbowed his elder in the shin as hard as he could. The Anbu in desperate pain pulled back his foot and tried to stand, barely able to because of the damage dealt to it. Not giving him a chance to recuperate, he kicked away the good leg of the Anbu with the hook. As the Anbu fell to his back, Naruto leapt over the man's prostrate form and grabbed his own ankles, falling with all his weight with his knees right into the Anbu's stomach. The Anbu made no sound as he got the hit. In fact, it looked as if he was trying to but couldn't because of all of his air being pushed out of his gut at once. Naruto grunted as he got off the anbu and locked the teen's neck in a chokehold. It was mainly for effort and to show that he had the anbu in his power, and didn't actually try. In fact, he released him in a few seconds and got up. He could see his genjutsu start to ripple a bit, meaning that the pain was starting to make him lose control of it. Squatting next to the anbu, he whispered close to his ear. Hey, control your genjutsu. It's starting to fall apart. The anbu made no response, but Naruto who could start to see green where the man's eyes would be fade away again into nothing, showing that he had resumed control over it. Naruto got back up and lightly stood on the man's uninjured foot. He then pulled up the anbu back up his feet by his hand. The anbu shakily stood up and braced most of his weight on his good leg. He bowed his head and shoulders and Naruto did the same. Yes, that's a definite 10. The anbu chuckled. Pretty good for an academy student. Thanks. But I could have been better. I would rather go for a 9, or 9.5 if possible. Don't want my head to swell any bigger, Naruto said wryly, and, especially since you weren't going all out. 9.5 it is then, the anbu replied. Iruka whose eyes were the size of dinner plates from watching the match wrote 9.5 next to Naruto's name. Everyone else seemed to be in similar states, sans Hinata who seemed to be happy for him and blushing, Sasuke who had observed the bout with a bit of begrudging respect, and Shino who only lifted an eyebrow over his shades. The happenstance was surprising. How many handicaps were you using? Naruto questioned, much to everyone's surprise. The anbu chuckled again amusedly. Weight seals on all of my limbs, non-use of chakra to enhance my attacks or cushioning damage and, some Shunin Taijutsu. Could have been done better if I used only one foot without the handicaps. You wanna fight again, kid, for real? The others listening on could not believe the number of debilitations the anbu was using. It did diminish Naruto a little in their eyes, but he had done what none of them had come close to achieving, except for Sasuke, and that was to actually beat him. He was also relatively unhurt. The anbu limped off the mat and blurred through a set of hand seals, and a second later, his hand lit up in an ethereal green glow. He ran it slowly over all his injured areas, and when he was done, he stood again, as good as new. Naruto walked off the mat and went under the tree beside Sasuke. The Uchiha merely glanced at him for a moment before closing his eyes. Nothing else was left to look for. The anbu walked back to the mat. Next, he said stoically. Iruka looked back at the list. Yamanaka Ino, comma. Most of the students had already gone over to the past side of the classroom. They had completed the ninjutsu portion of their test and all sported their shiny new forehead protectors. Most opted to wear it in the usual fashion on their foreheads while others wore it around their necks or around their upper arm, like Shikamaru. Uzumaki sat beside Uchiha and Yamanaka, waiting for his turn. He had the feeling that he was going to fail again, but so what? Wasn't going to be the end of the world. At least he put in a good effort this year. Besides, he wasn't too anxious about getting out of the academy to start a career that had a high mortality rate. He sighed as he looked around at the students who had already passed, noting how happy they are. I'm in denial. I won't whoop for joy if I pass, but I'm not gonna get all moody if I don't. But it's so damn boring in here, I guess I do want to pass. A boy exited from the ninjutsu testing room excitedly, face beaming as he pointed a thumb at his Hitai-8. He half ran to his friends who had already passed, all boasting. Mizuki who had followed the boy outside gave an almost tisk tisk vibe as he watched them. He turned to the last three examiners. Uchiha Sasuke. You're next. The onyx-eyed youth got out of his seat and followed the silver-haired man inside the room and shut the door behind him. 2 minutes later, he was back out, now sporting a Hitai-8 on his forehead. Seeing that the exams were almost done anyway, he just sat back in his original seat beside Naruto. The blonde lifted an eyebrow at this but said nothing. At the back of his mind, he was wondering where his counterparts' fangirls were, but he realized that almost, if not all of them, were now sporting large bruises and welts on their faces and arms from the earlier taijutsu portion. They were no doubt embarrassed and ashamed of them, since Sasuke himself had only one that was near invisible. Or they were thinking that the bruises were marring their good looks. Either way, Naruto was happy for the quiet. Mizuki poked his head out of the open doorway. Uzumaki Naruto, you're up next. He got out of his seat at the beacon and made his way inside. Once in, he closed the door and looked to his teachers, both of which were seated. He could see 2 forehead protectors in a box close to Iruka on the table. He quickly refocused his attention to Mizuki, who had started to speak. I need you to do a henge. Make your attempt when ready. Transformation. Naruto seamlessly hanged into Shikamaru Nara and yawned in the impersonation, muttering the word, troublesome. Iruka half expected it though, knowing that the 2 boys shared a few attitudes. The blonde broke his henge and once again stood at attention, waiting for his next test. He already knew what it was, though. All right. Now, do a kawarimi. Let us know when ready, Mizuki said. Ready, Naruto said immediately. Iruka took up a senbon sitting in a cup on the table and threw it at the boy's thigh. In a poof of smoke, it was revealed that he had substituted for a chair. Yumino sighed in relief. Last year, Naruto had replaced himself for Mizuki, and as of consequence, the silver-haired man took it in his leg. While impressive to be able to substitute himself for a chunin when he was not yet a genin, he got a lot of flack for the action. Naruto re-entered the room from outside, plucked the needle from the chair, then placed the furniture back outside. He then gave back the needle to Iruka, who replaced it in the cup. The boy then returned to his place, thoroughly ready to fail. All right, Naruto. Time for your last jutsu. I need you to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu. Clone Technique 3 is the requirement. Mizuki stated. The boy sighed inwardly. Well, that's just how it goes. At least I have all of this year's notes in case I fail. I won't have to take them again, but damn. This is getting too goddamned repetitive. I should have tried to find out if I would pass or not. He went through the 3 hand seals, ending on dog. Bunshin no Jutsu, comma. He cleaned out his desk, gathering all of his notes together, and put them in his knapsack. He then strapped it to his back and prepared to leave, but someone stood in his way. Of all people, it was Sasuke. Naruto. Whatcha want? He asked evenly. He didn't know what he wanted. Is he feeling smug or something? How come you're not wearing your headband? I didn't pass. For a full second, the Uchiha looked surprised, something that Naruto had never seen on the youth before. How come? Bunshin. I can't do it. Ah, maybe it's like my mind. Did you know that I've got problems doing it too? Naruto lifted an eyebrow. No, I didn't. If you did, how did you pass? I usually use up most of my chakra before attempting the jutsu. When I've less chakra, it's easier to control before doing it. The first thing I did this morning was to use most of my chakra before coming to school and doing the exam. If they're going to make use attempt it all year at end of terms, then it was bound to be in the practical too. Naruto thought over what the Uchiha said. The chakra theory made sense. It should be easier to create a jutsu by putting all the chakra you had left in it when running low than to use a tiny amount of chakra when you had too much. But one thing did not make sense. So why are you telling me now, when I've already failed? Hell, why try to help me at all? He questioned. We don't talk. Sasuke gave off a shrugging vibe. If you'd mentioned your control earlier, I would have told you. And for the fact that I will have to be placed on a team soon. You're probably the only person here with enough capabilities to make a decent teammate. Unlike these others who barely try. I don't want anyone slowing me down, Sasuke admitted before he started to walk away. You should go talk to the teachers and see if they'll give you a second chance. Naruto stared at the retreating boy. That he did not see coming. All he said made perfect sense, but he never would have thought the Uchiha had that side to him. He shrugged before he went off in search of one of his chunin teachers. He saw Mizuki first, inside the ninjutsu test room. Excuse me, Mizuki-sensei. I would like to speak to you about something. I as well. I was just about to go look for you. But you may speak first. He put down his paperwork and listened. I think I've found a way to be able to perform the Bunshin technique. Is it possible for me to retake that particular portion of the test? Say, he briefly wondered what he could do to burn off all of his chakra. He'd need time. Tomorrow. Mizuki was doing cartwheels in his mind at the incredibly easy opportunity to get what he wanted. No, Naruto. You can't do this test again. You did pretty well in the other portions of the test, so I thought I'd tell you about another makeup test that is possible at this time. I'm listening. Naruto finally finished reading the Jutsu theory thoroughly for the second time. Alright. So I just formed the hand seal like so. He made the modified ox hand seal and started manipulating his chakra. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clone technique. A plume of smoke erupted beside him, out of which a clone emerged. Already sure that the clone was a success, he decided to test it nonetheless with a fist bump. Both did it at the same time. Felt pretty solid. He dispersed the clone and turned back to the scroll. He saw numerous other techniques that barely made any sense to his eyes, and most of them had next to impossible requirements or needed scarce resources. Absent-mindedly wondering how many clones he could make, he abused the stronger version of the technique and was delighted when he found himself able to make hundreds. He also found that he could make them far more durable by expending more chakra into them. Not much more was gleaned after that, and after 30 minutes more of experimentation, he felt himself running on fumes. All of a sudden, he was discovered by one of his Chunin instructors. Naruto, what are you doing with the scroll of forbidden jutsu? Iruka yelled, dropping from a nearby tree branch and entering the clearing the Uzumaki was in. Naruto blinked. I'm just doing the secondary test, Iruka-sensei. You should know about it. After all, Mizuki-sensei said that all the ninja were in on it. Secondary test. What secondary test? There's no such thing. Naruto. Kami, what else has Mizuki been saying to you? Iruka asked the blonde, unbelieving. A large Fuma shuriken sailed horizontally through the clearing from behind Iruka. Naruto saw it coming and tackled the scarred man to the ground, making them both lie flat as it passed over them, slicing through more trees, leaving destruction in its wake. Oof. Kuso. Iruka had most of his breath knocked out of him when the blonde dove into his stomach. He was about to protest when he saw the weapon sail above him, right where his chest would have been. He quickly rolled the Uzumaki off of him and took out a kunai from his pouch. Who's there? Mizuki stepped out of the shadows in the trees and smirked. My, Iruka. Don't tell me that you had to be saved by an academy student. What's this all about, Mizuki? Iruka stepped in front of Naruto as he yelled his question. It's an exam exercise. Didn't you know? He subtly shook his right hand, loosening his hidden kunai from its place inside his sleeve. We were testing Naruto. Mizuki laughed. The hell? Don't break character. Naruto failed. There is no such test, Mizuki. In answer, kunai fell into his waiting palm and he threw it at a great speed. Iruka couldn't dodge in time. So he tried to turn a little, the knife taking root in his lung instead of his heart. Still, not looking too good. Ah, Mizuki, you're a traitor. Naruto, who had watched the whole exchange, now realized what was happening. He was tricked to steal the scroll of forbidden techniques. Now the person who could defend him just took a hit from someone he was inferior to. In short, he was low on chakra and he had to go versus a Chunin who was very likely to kill him. Naruto, give me the scroll. The silver-haired man's tone spoke volumes of seriousness. Naruto tried to think of a way out. He hoped that the Hokage was watching this and was on his way to help him. He'd better stall. You're the one messing with my tests, aren't you? Even the one today. Yeah, that's right. 9 tails. The Uzumaki frowned. 9 tails. Mizuki grinned. Didn't you know? Don't tell him, Mizuki-tem. It's forbidden. The man on the ground choked a little on some blood before he spat it out. What's forbidden? Naruto asked, his expression confused. When the Kyuubi appeared 13 years ago, yeah, the Kyuubi wasn't destroyed or killed by the 4th Hokage. It was sealed in a newborn infant at the time. That's why you have no parents. That's why you have those whisker marks. That's why everyone hates you. It's because you're the 9-tailed fox. Mizuki shouted. He unstrapped his second Fuma shuriken from off his back. Enough chit-chat. Die. He slung the massive shuriken at the boy. Iruka was about to throw himself in front of it when Naruto took a kunai and pushed the Chunin out of the way. As the shuriken was about to cleave its way through the blonde, he sidestepped it and stuck the kunai through the shuriken's center hole. He felt its driving force getting to be too much to completely stop it, so he slammed it into the ground. It started to cut through the soil, but after a moment, it stopped and stayed. The other 2 Chunin were wide-eyed. What? You can't expect me to learn everything at school, did you? Naruto smirked. Besides, I already had my suspicions about the fox. If anything, I like the whisker marks. Removed his kunai from the shuriken hole and assumed his taijutsu style, with the kunai in a forward grip. Mizuki took out a kunai and readied his stance as well. You're getting ahead of yourself. I was going to kill you quickly, but now, I'm going to stab you in every organ, then, I'm gonna drive my kunai through your eyes. Meh, I got nothing. The boy shrugged. Mizuki sprinted at the boy with his kunai driving forward, fully intent on carrying out his threat. Naruto lifted his own kunai and parried it to his right. As Mizuki started to lose his balance at his diverted velocity, Naruto grabbed the man's arm at the elbow and turned him around fully before pushing him away. He then threw his kunai at the man's back. He had unfortunately missed all his vital organs. The silver-haired Chunin merely grunted in pain before he reached his free hand behind him and plucked it out. GH. He turned around and glared at the boy. He gripped the kunai in a fist of iron before he threw it at a terrific speed, aiming for the boy's face. The lad fell flat as it passed over him, the bloody kunai embedding itself in a tree. Naruto got back up and starting throwing his shuriken at the man, but he deflected them all. Soon running out, he noticed the fuma stuck in the ground from earlier close to him. He pulled it up gingerly before he started spinning around twice, swinging the massive shuriken before he threw it at the traitor, but he simply sidestepped it. In a blur, Mizuki had charged the boy and buried his foot in Naruto's gut. The Uzumaki gasped for air weakly before he tried to press on, grabbing the foot at the ankle and turning it on the inside. The man went with the turn and fell flat on his face with Naruto still holding his leg. Before he could lash out with his second leg, Naruto lifted his leg and drop-kicked the man on the ground with his heel, right into the small of his back. Gah! Naruto finished twisting the man's foot, finally feeling satisfied when he heard a crack. The man yelled in pain before he finally kicked away the boy, who fell onto his back. The man got back up painfully and unsteadily onto his good leg before he shuffled over to the boy. He took out his last kunai and plunged it down at the boy's heart. The boy poofed away into a log, making Mizuki give a small yelp in surprise. He was about to go search for him, but the boy fell out of a nearby tree ungracefully in a heap on the ground. Naruto was panting heavily. It took all the chakra he had left to perform the substitution, and his body had given out on him. Mizuki pulled his kunai out of the log and smirked before shakily making his way over to the boy. Said boy was staring wide-eyed as his about-to-be killer come over to him, only to be stopped by Iruka, who grabbed his foot. What the, Iruka, let me go. The traitor said angrily, trying to pull away. Iruka mumbled something incomprehensible. Mizuki, finally having enough, stabbed the man in the back, right where his heart would be. Iruka grunted weakly. He looked over to Naruto and mouthed, "I'm sorry." The light faded from his eyes as Naruto stared in disbelief as his former teacher murdered another. Mizuki was still caught in a dead man's grip, but he shrugged it off easily and callously. Naruto felt something start to stir inside him as his visage became more feral, his whisker marks deepened and his eyes red and slitted. He found new strength in his chakra coils and the boy got to his feet, thoroughly befuddled why this was so. He looked at his hands to see them with extended nails, resembling claws. The boy scowled as he looked up once more at Mizuki, who was startled at the boy's intimidating feral looks. The boy snapped before he snarled in anger. In a blur, the boy disappeared and reappeared behind the man in a burst of speed, slashing at his neck, releasing a red torrent. Not done, he kicked the man at his earlier stab wound, making the man face plant. The boy grasped both of the man's legs and swung him around, his blood splashing around them with perfect radius before he flung the man against a tree. At the last second, Mizuki had turned himself so his back would impact it instead of his head. He slid down it in a heap, blood freely running down his body and dyeing his clothes a deep shade of crimson in the worst way. Naruto picked up the man's kunai and stalked over to the man and picked him up by the shoulder, pressing most of his weight against a tree. He then started stabbing the man repeatedly in a hellish fury while screaming, as if it would bring his teacher back to life. The man had already died from the 20th stab, but the boy kept going, the front of the boy's orange jumpsuit now stained red and bloody, as was his stabbing hand. His rage continued well further stab before he plunged the kunai through the man's right eye socket, driving it through to the back of the tree and staked him there. Viscous eye fluid mixed with blood flowed out of the socket down his cheek, resembling tears. Naruto backpedaled slowly from the bloody scene as he came down from his emotional high. When the Hokage and two Anbu showed up a few minutes later, they found the boy slumped against another tree, watching his shaking, bloody hands. 1. I'm making him 13 instead of 12. I'm going to be frank. When I put up my first short story with the Hanabi pairing, GPHL, I wasn't expecting a lot of views. Now, I put up an unusual pairing, Kin, which I like to read every once in a while, and everyone's just flocking to it. It's passed GPHL in popularity in just 2 chapters. Wow. The Sandaime Hokage's eyes flickered to all 3 people in the clearing. 2 of them were corpses while all 3 were blooded, particularly Mizuki. The corpses did not hold his attention for long, though. Instead, it was centered on Naruto, who was in some type of catatonic shock, who still hadn't acknowledged his or the ANBU's presence. The boy was just sitting there as if he had just witnessed a murder, which he practically had. Whilst striding over to the boy, he motioned to the 2 Anbu to check Iruka for a pulse and to remove Mizuki. Reaching the boy, he mentally recalled what psychology books and experience had taught him in adverse times such as these. He sat beside the boy in the grass at the foot of the tree and waited for Naruto to speak first. When it showed that he was capable of speech, then he would speak to him. Hiruzen watched the 2 Anbu look over Iruka before shaking their heads to him. The man sighed as he waved at them, signaling them to take the man to the morgue. They did and soon returned and checked Mizuki's carcass. At first, they were fussing over how to remove him from his spot on the tree without making it worse. That's when they realized that it couldn't get any worse for the man. With a grunt, one of them yanked out the kunai, pinning up the man to the tree, and shunshined away with him as well. They returned quickly and then picked up every weapon on the ground. In a matter of minutes, besides the crimson smears on the ground and the bloody Uzumaki, there was nothing unusual in the clearing. It had been a few hours. Sarutobi had long since dismissed the Anbu and waited patiently beside Naruto. It was now midnight, the start of Saturday morning, but he was a man of patience. Besides, if Naruto could stay still and watched his own hands for 3 hours and he as a Kage couldn't, he no longer deserved the title. Iruka sensei. He killed Iruka as sensei. He was trying to help me. And he killed him. Hiruzen looked to him, waiting expectantly. He knew what was coming next. And then killed Mizuki. He looked at his hands and as if he just noticed that they were bloody, he tried to wipe them on his clothes. When he realized that his clothes were also bloodied with Mizuki's life, he started to furiously wipe his hands on the grass, but the blood was already dry. It's my fault, the Sandaime stated as he watched the boy's actions. If only I had arrived sooner, this could have been prevented. I had some difficulty finding here because nothing is outstanding to this location. I must really be a demon. He started to stutter. Naruto-kun. Stop. You are not a demon. You merely hold the beast back at bay. You are its prison. You are its master. You used its power to kill a handicapped teacher. Hiruzen shook his head. They lived in a bloody ninja world. Mizuki was about to kill you. Were you going to let him kill you? No. Of course not. If only I had my chakra at the time, and beaten him up or something. Or, if I had tried to find out. Naruto. Perhaps you should come to my home and sleep instead. It would benefit you more if you weren't alone right now. The Hokage stood up and held out his hand to the boy. Naruto watched him for a moment, not knowing what to do for himself, before grasping the man's hand. As soon as he did, they both disappeared in a body flicker of a swirl of leaves. Naruto's eyes snapped open suddenly, as was his habit every day to awake at this time. He already registered where he was the second he saw the ceiling. He knew what was happening once more. His memory kicked in about what happened the night before. His body slightly ached in soreness as he remembered stabbing a dead man. The man had no identity to him. He was just another person. Didn't matter if he was good or bad. He knew all the speeches that would be given him, all the condolences for Iruka. He might as well get breakfast, and the sooner he got this day over with, the sooner he could get to training. Now that he had killed, his ninja career had taken off, he could train without repercussions for training in regimens beyond that of his class in the open. So I took one day to get over it. Is that normal? Recalling that there was a demon sealed inside him, Naruto realized that nothing about him was normal. He kicked off the sheets and leaned over the edge onto his feet. He immediately left the room and made his way to the kitchen to have breakfast. It would be his second time, so he knew where to go, not getting lost or wandering into the wrong rooms along the way. Finding the kitchen, he plopped down in an empty seat in between the older man with brown hair and a goatee and a little boy who was still changing teeth. He already knew their names, but if they were going through introductions again, he would just roll with it. Morning, Naruto. How did you sleep? The elder asked, putting down his booklet. Like the usual. The blonde grunted. The man took that as a good sign that he was over his shock. Naruto. Huh. The little boy said. Mornin' Naruto. My name's Konohamaru. Hey, Konohamaru. The man with the goatee got up and started preparing breakfast. You didn't stumble your way into our rooms on accident coming here, did you, Naruto? No, Asuma-san. The man lifted an eyebrow. How did he know my name? You're well known in the village. Naruto lied smoothly, not wanting to disclose that he knew him from their future meeting. Oh, well, good for me, huh? I'm popular. The Sarutobi chuckled as he prepared some soba noodles and eggs and dished it out to the two boys, as well as some for himself, before seating himself again. Naruto frowned a bit, staring at the soba. It was his least favorite noodle type and he had to go through it again for the second time. He shrugged and started eating, hurrying to get it over with and out of the way. Soon finished, he placed his dish in the sink. He was going to have to be ignorant for a few hours. Nothing he couldn't handle. So, Sarutobi-san. Asuma looked up from his meal. Can I have my clothes? I can't just go out in underclothes that I slept in. That's going to be a problem. We disposed of your bloody jumpsuit. You didn't expect to go back to wearing it, did you? So what am I going to wear then? He retorted. I'm sure I can find something around here you can try on. At least until we get you to the clothing store that outfits ninjas. Besides, if you have any more orange jumpsuits at home like the one you were wearing, get rid of them too. Honestly, kid, you're gonna need to lose bright colors so you don't catch a kunai in your back when you're out in the field. Outfit change. Oh yeah, I will. I definitely will. X equals X equals. Naruto and Asuma completed their journey to the ninja service establishment, one of them gratefully. The younger of the pair wore a jacket and pants 2 sizes too big and the cuffs he had put into them were beginning to come undone, not to mention the fact that the clothing wasn't already cumbersome and awkward enough, to begin with. They pushed the door in and entered, allowing the smell of brand new clothing and lubricating oil to hit their nostrils. The store was relatively empty of other patrons, so they just made their way to the front desk and tapped the bell waiting on it. Hello, Asuma called. I'd like some service. Coming. A girl's voice sounded from the back. Almost immediately, a twin bun-haired girl entered through a door behind the counter, came up to the two males. Welcome to Higarashi's Shinobi Supplies. She welcomed. It sounded more genuine than routine, and Naruto smiled in appreciation. Hey Tenten, the Sarutobi greeted. I came down to get Naruto here some things to prepare himself to be a ninja. He gestured to the boy by patting him on the head. And get him some new clothes. The girl smiled at the blonde. Naruto, is it? I've heard of you before. Good things, right? He lifted an eyebrow. He goofily did a pose to amuse, but the girl merely shrugged. Well, they said you were so quiet most people didn't know what you sounded like. The Higurashi smirked. I guess I should count myself lucky. Let's begin shopping, shall we? Asuma suggested to the children. In a short half-hour later, Naruto was dressed in a dark blue close-fitting shirt with a versus neck and long sleeves that were slack around the elbows. Black ankle-length pants went far in completing the look and gray sandals rounded it all off nicely. It echoed his previous outfit, but the drab color scheme was more agreeable with everyone present. He had a backpack on his back that he placed his mesh armor inside to carry home, as well as a set of dozens of new shurikens, kunais, and yards of ninja wire on a spool, and about 10 each of C-ranked and B-ranked paper bombs. He had everything sorted out in different pockets in the said backpack, and with the even distribution, the bag felt right at home on his back. Now for a weapon. Tenten slightly squealed in her excitement but stopped when she saw the patron staring at her as if the Bukijutsu tools hadn't just been purchased. What? I just like weapons, okay. Sheesh. She waved her hand dismissively before she turned to Naruto. Don't you want something to fall back on when you've just about thrown everything else? Never fancied that kind of situation for anyone. So, what kind of weapon would you like to use? She took his hand and stretched it while feeling his biceps. Good definition. A strength type O guy. He retracted his arm and started to think about how he stabbed Mizuki full of holes. I must still have trauma. Something. Blunt. Tonfa. Iron knuckles. Hammers. Staffs. Asuma felt put on the spot. His father had asked him to help Naruto get equipped, but he didn't count on his purchases going into this region. Let me see your staffs. And mind the pricing. She led them to the back rooms to look over their merchandise of staffs, which was quite impressive, showing them staff after staff. Nothing fully appealed to the blonde. His mind started to wander back to when the Hokage asked if he would have let Mizuki kill him. He didn't want to kill anyone, but sooner or later he would need to. It was his profession. Besides, he knew what he wanted. He decided to speak up. Is there anything that's both blunt and sharp at the same time? Anything. She stopped what she was doing and looked up to her forehead in thought. Well, I think I have a tonfa with a blade on one side. No. Something else. To be honest, we got something experimental from the Land of Iron 2 years ago. No one wanted it. Well, what is it, Tenten? Asuma asked. It's like some kind of folding blade. It's also like a weird kind of jute, too. Let me ask Tu-san if he knows where it is. She ran back to a door that likely led into her living quarters while the males waited on her return. A few minutes later, she returned with a relatively small box in her palm before she removed the cover and presented it to the Uzumaki. It was like an oversized rectangle-shaped handle with slight palm grips on either side. It was about 6 inches long. Asuma gave a disbelieving air. That's it. Where's the rest of it? Tenten firmly gripped it before she swung it down rapidly. The rest of the weapon extended out by 2 feet, thick at the bottom and small at the top. On one side, it was rounded off and blunt, but the other side was sharp to a decent degree. It was like a one-edged sword with an extremely blunt opposite side. 2. That's new, the man with the goatee remarked, observing the development. The boy next to him beamed at the sharpened baton and asked the girl how much it cost. I asked Tu-san about it and he said he had clean forgotten about it. He says you can have it for half price. That's 8,000 ryo. Asuma's cigarette fell out of his mouth when his jaw dropped. That thing was 16,000 ryo. Yeah, Tenten smiled cheerfully. It's made with some expensive alloy to guarantee durability. Besides, chakra can be infused into it. That's always a good thing. Right. I mean, I don't know if he can do it, but sooner or later he'll learn, right? I don't have that much on me. Asuma scratched the back of his head while he picked up his cigarette off the ground. I'll be back. Gimme a few minutes. He hurriedly left in Shunshin's, leaving the children to stand around awkwardly in his absence. So, used anything like this before? The blonde asked. No, never. If you're going to learn, you'll probably need a sword user and a baton user or something. She shrugged. Or figure it out yourself, worst case scenario. I self-taught myself, but it always feels lacking. Maybe you could read a book on human anatomy, figure out the best places to hit in the meantime. The chat continued like this for a while until the man came back, patting a pocket with more confidence than he'd had previously. All right, I think I've got enough to cover the whole sum. They went back to the front desk where the brown-eyed girl retrieved a calculator and the 2 patrons crossed back to the correct side of the counter. As soon as they were settled, Tenten added up the prices. Okay, let's see. Kunai, shuriken, bombs. She punched the buttons in the buttons on the calculator while she announced the items. Wire. And, that half-blade thing. Naruto sweat dropped at her name for it, as it continued to show how little she knew about it. That's 23,810 ryo. Good thing it's not my money. Asuma counted out the money exactly when Naruto stopped him by holding his hand out in front of him. What is it, Naruto? Just give her the full 24,000. Like a tip. A tip. The man smiled like the cat who ate the canary. You like Tenten, Naruto. The boy was not about to be embarrassed. Yeah, she's nice, he said in earnest. Asuma, now realizing his tease had no effect, merely grumbled to himself before handing over the money to the blushing girl. Whatever. Naruto took up the tactical weapon from off the counter. Thanks, Tenten. See you around. Yeah, later. She turned around stiffly before disappearing into the back room again, muttering something about blondes. Naruto merely sighed. Well, that's that. I'm just gonna go home to drop the things off and then we can go visit old man Hokage. X. The aged Sandame sighed as he stroked his forehead in, trying to chase away the growing headache. And Naruto was the source of it all. Naruto learned the shadow clone technique in a mere hour. He's got some good battlefield sense too, fresh out of the academy and taking down a Chunin, albeit violently. One of the Hyuga Anbu told me that he used the Kyuubi's chakra in the final moments. I should have him under watch for a while longer. Sensing that he was about to be disturbed, he looked at the door, just before it was knocked. Getting a feel for the chakras on the other side, he invited them to enter. Come in. Just dropping Naruto off, Asuma said as they entered, the boy forwards towards the man. He said he wanted to see you. Okay, Asuma, you can leave. If anything, Naruto can explain some things. With a quick wave, the man left via the door again, allowing the two to be alone. So, Naruto-kun, the Hokage said to the 13-year-old, how are you feeling now? I feel better. I'm not at a full 100%, but I'm better. Maybe I'll never be at a full 100 again. You mean a loss of innocence? He asked rhetorically. It's a terrible ninja world, Naruto-kun, and I won't lie to you, you'd be expected to kill again, by your own choice, when you don't have one, and when your home asks you to. It's not an endpoint that everyone wants, and it'd be up to you to gauge all your options first. I know all that. It's just, the boy hesitated. Could have done without all the trauma, all that bloodshed. Kami. And Iruka. He didn't deserve that. And what about me? Having the Kyuubi in me. Did it help influence that? Hiruzen thought of the answer's ramifications in the long term and shook his head. So I can't blame it. I did all of that myself. I want to say that anybody that I do end up killing might be people who deserve it, that they're nasty, bottom of the barrel scum. It's something that you do get used to, taking a life. Different ninjas have different ideologies and methods of dealing with it, and all of it is reasonable, as long as one doesn't like it. Never. Good. If you need to discuss that morbid topic further, I could get you some psychiatric help. It's not uncommon. I can imagine a long line. To be honest, Naruto interrupted with the jest, getting the Hokage to smile a bit. But what's your ideology about killing? It's either the cure to the bane of other people, or the end of a person's pain. Hiruzen allowed the boy some time to consider it and could see that he was slowly adopting it as his own. He could feel his headache starting to disappear already. You were forced to grow up sooner than you should have, but in any case, I'm glad to know that you were spared in this disaster. I provided some money for you to get some supplies. About that, am I a ninja now? Hiruzen chuckled. Naruto was somewhat more friendly with him. Perhaps it was because of the bonding they were doing recently. Yes, Naruto-kun. In fact, here is your headband. I wanted to give it to you myself. He reached inside his desk and fished out a headband with a blue cloth and tossed it to him deftly. Congratulations. You're one step closer to being Hokage. Naruto caught the headband and looked at the leaf insignia. Hokage. Huh. He placed it on his forehead and tied it behind his head. I guess so. If not a Hokage, then what? The man used to hear the boy proclaim about being Kage up until 3 years ago. Did he have a new dream? A person who always makes the right decision. Can't say being perfect, but being wrong sucks pretty bad. He had somewhat rehearsed his answer. As that's so. Making decisions based on others' past experiences. No. Well, yeah, them too. But mostly decisions based on mine. Sarutobi was befuddled. The boy was only 13 years old. How much experience did he have to make wise and informed decisions? Anyway, Gigi, I want to say thank you for paying for my supplies. Especially for the last weapon. What was it? Naruto described it to him and how it worked in a nutshell. And one side's sharp and the other is blunt. I see. Will you name it? Hell no. Anyone who names a weapon obviously doesn't have time to be making friends. The last thing I want is another reason to need a psychiatrist. It's a fancy jute. Everything came to 24,000 ryo, by the way. Seeing the Hokage's surprised reaction, he went on to explain, it would have been more expensive if I wasn't given a discount. That's what they told me anyway. Besides, I'll pay you back when I get a high-ranking mission pay, huh? Hint hint. I wanna go save a princess or something. Hiruzen chuckled. No need. My own account is quite sizable after all these years of saving. I don't even really make purchases that often anymore. That's so. Well, my apartment needs a little renovating then, if you don't mind. Perhaps in a fortnight. Get some planning done and such. Naruto bowed his head and shoulders in thankfulness. Thanks, Gigi. X equals X equals. He sat down in his usual seat, bored as usual. Everyone jostled around excitedly, sporting their headbands in their respective places. Most were conversing loudly about how they were going to be the best, yelling who was better than who, and so on. The door opened slowly and all eyes turned to see Sasuke Uchiha wearing his usual stoicism on the outside. The last Uchiha saw fangirls swarming his usual seat, waiting on him to sit in anticipation. He groaned internally before sitting beside Naruto. When all saw his action, it was then that they finally took notice of Naruto's presence. Naruto started to count in his mind. 3, 2, 1, Q in Izuka. Naruto. What the hell are you doing here? You failed the test Friday, idiot. This is just for people who are real ninjas. Naruto had rehearsed his answer. I am a real ninja. But if you want to know how I passed, wait 3 minutes. You'll soon find out. What the does that mean? Kiba yelled the question. Kiba, be patient. His answer is curious, but if it has merit, we shall see what he means when 3 minutes have flown, Shino said quietly, placating the boy. Everyone shrugged and decided to wait as well. Something had always been strange about Naruto. Perhaps today they could get some answers. Sasuke closed his eyes. So you passed, huh? Yeah, your advice was useful but it wasn't what I used. As that's so, what did you do? The coal-eyed youth asked. 2.5 minutes. HN. Exactly 2.5 minutes later, a puff of smoke erupted behind the teacher's desk at the front of the class. When it cleared, it revealed the Taijutsu testing Anbu from Friday. It is now 9 a.m. Get to your seats, he ordered in his monotone. Everyone who was standing or seated inappropriately quickly got to their correct seats, thoroughly intimidated. When they were all settled, the Anbu began to speak again. I will speak only once. I will not repeat myself pertaining to any controversial matter involved. If anything is unclear, seek clarity elsewhere. Getting their affirmative response, he nodded. Very well. I've been commissioned by the Hokage and Naruto Uzumaki to bring some issues to light. It was to be done in the hopes that all of you would rid yourselves of complacency and childish ways, as the life of the shinobi is riddled with death, lies, and betrayal. Only a few details were to be spared. He threw a kunai blurring quick that took root in Shikamaru's desk, right next to his head. The boy was jolted awake by the sudden action. As in that case, I could have killed him in his slumber. The Anbu continued. Suddenly, everyone else who had started to zone out was back at full attention. This wasn't some ordinary customary warning anymore. On Friday, Mizuki, your Chunin teacher, deceived Naruto and convinced him to steal the scroll of forbidden techniques for himself to pilfer. Before the scroll could change hands, Iruka Yumino found Naruto trying to learn a technique from said scroll. Just as Iruka confronted him for stealing it, Mizuki arrived and betrayed them both. Iruka was mortally injured, leaving Naruto to fend off Mizuki. Before he could be killed, Iruka intervened, and was murdered trying to protect him. Everyone leaned forward, eyes getting bigger and bigger as the Anbu told the tale. Mizuki finished off Iruka by stabbing him in his back, right into his heart. When Naruto saw that Iruka got killed, he himself killed Mizuki in reprisal by stabbing him. Over 50, Naruto muttered. Over 50 times in his upper torso, before stabbing Mizuki through his eye and pinning him to the tree in his rage. Everyone gave the blonde a horrified look before they tried to inch away from him, sans Sasuke. This is why none of your teachers are present. Iruka is now buried and Mizuki is now ashes. The reason for this recount is to make it clear that you understand what kind of life you're getting into. Being a ninja is not fun and games. To be completely straightforward, we kill for a living. All who think this is too much for them to handle, please leave now. Everyone looked at each other, a bit unsure. Slowly, Roana got out of his seat and strode out of the class. With his exodus, more and more of the students trickled out until only 18 students remained. If that is all, I shall now read the teams with their respective squad numbers along with Jonin Sensei's. There will be some improvisation for teams broken with the probable loss of some team members who just made their exit. He quickly announced teams from memory recall to the silent class. Next is Team 7, Uchiha, Uzumaki and Haruno. Team 8 is Hyuga, Aburame and Inuzuka. Team 9 is still in circulation. Team 10 is Yamanaka, Nara and Akamichi. Your senseis will come to fetch you at times of their choosing in this room. He looked over the class through his mask in scrutiny. Good day, he finished, before leaving in a body flicker. Most of the students started to breathe more easily in the ANBU's leave. They all looked to Naruto, who still retained a bored and hard look. Now you know why, Inuzuka. Find anything wrong? Something unclear? I don't believe it. Besides, you still can't even create a decent clone. Do you think you're hot stuff? You're still shit. Most of the girls were hesitant and no one agreed with Kiba, Sakura especially, not knowing how to speak since he was now her teammate. Suddenly afraid, she started to wonder if he would kill her, seeing that she always tried to hit him. He would have plenty of chances, now that they were on the same team. She wasn't even feeling celebratory knowing that she would be on the same team with Sasuke as well. Naruto formed the cross-ram handseal and formed a clone out in the walkway beside Kiba. You were saying, Faye, it's just one. Most of us can make a half dozen. Naruto nodded to the clone, who nodded back in response. The clone decked Kiba in the face right below his eye, making the boy fall back onto his butt. Stay down, the clone said before it reached its hands up and snapped its neck, dispersing in smoke. Kiba was too frightened to even move from his spot on the floor. Hinata from where she was sitting was saddened by Naruto's actions, starting to think that there was more to him that she hadn't seen, and more that she didn't want to. Shino merely raised an eyebrow while Sasuke was intrigued. That's new. Yes, it is, Sasuke. Yes, it is. It had been 3 hours. The door slid open to reveal a Jonin with a half mask and spiky silver hair that styled upwards and to the side. He also wore his Hittite over his left eye, which had finished covering up his face by a fair 3/4. His right eye looked over the remaining 3 students who were waiting for him. Naruto was spinning a kunai on his fingertips trying to improve his chakra control. Sasuke was sitting beside him with his hands balled under his chin and Sakura sat behind Sasuke, reading. He noticed that the girl was glancing nervously at Naruto, and from what he had heard, Kakashi believed that he knew why. Looks like a quiet bunch. Team 7, meet me on the roof, he announced before walking off, leaving the door open for them to exit as well. The students heaved themselves up and filed out to the roof, Sasuke in the lead. When they arrived there, they saw their supposed sensei waiting on them with his hands in his pockets. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto called to him when he was hailing distance. How do you know my name? The man replied in question. The genin finished closing the distance and sat on the steps in front of the jonin. You're very well known, he lied. Kakashi narrowed his visible eye, detecting the lie. Why would he lie? How does he know? That's fine, he stated, not betraying his thoughts. It was a good lie because he was well known. How else, however, could he know, and why would he want to hide it? He'd find out later. As you all just heard, my name is Kakashi Hatake. We will have some introductions. Who's first? Kakashi gave an example himself on how it was to be done, but he downright skipped telling them anything besides his name. Now it's your turn, Sakura. All right. My name is Sakura Haruno. I like. She looked over at Sasuke and blushed heavily. I dislike. She glanced at Naruto and hesitated. Eno pig. My hobbies are. She looked at Sasuke with her peripherals. Making scrapbooks and reading. And my dream is, she now squealed a little. Oh, Kay, I'm almost sorry I asked. Brooder, you're up. Hold up. Naruto interjected. You looked at Sasuke, talking about making scrapbooks and, he paused in hesitation. Never mind. Go ahead, Sasuke. Let's save the best for last. By the way, You better check to see if you've lost some of your hair or some shit. Sakura yelled that she didn't do anything like that, and Naruto laughed until his eyes started to water. Whatever. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like to train. I dislike fangirls. My hobbies and likes are the same. My dream? No, my ambition is to kill Itachi. A little dark. Kakashi sighed. Blondie, you're next. My name is Uzumaki. Hitaki, he said evenly. His visible eye narrowed before he relented. Fine. You call me by name and title, I'll call you yours. Naruto, introduce yourself please. Naruto held his hands up. Hey, sorry. Don't wanna sound disrespectful, but I don't like hearing Blondie. It sounds really disrespectful. Just use my name, especially since we don't know each other so well. Okay, some perspective. Can I call you Emo Eyepatch? I get your point, Uzumaki, Kakashi said, his voice getting stern. Now make your introduction. Alright. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like to be well informed and surrogate family members like Ayame and Hokage Gigi. I dislike those who are biased towards me. My hobbies include, what do I like doing? I think training, and I guess fixing things. Yeah, fixing things. My dream is to always be able to make the best decisions. It's a stupid kinda dream, but it'd be nice to have people be able to depend on you, he said with a small smile. It's impossible to always make the right decision, Hitaki remarked with a small sigh. My time with Obito and Rin is proof of that. It is impossible, Naruto admitted carelessly, but all you need is a little foresight. Now, what's next, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi coughed into his hand to clear his throat. The test you did Friday was merely a screening process to see who would and could be Genin material. You still have another test. Say what? Sakura nearly shrieked. You have to pass the respective Jonin's test. Each of us Jonins has our own exam and mine is a bell test. Elaborate please, Naruto said. I'll tell you tomorrow. And don't eat any breakfast tomorrow or you'll puke. Sasuke shrugged at this. Naruto grumbled about mad teachers, and Sakura was downright indignant. Kakashi I smiled. Test starts at 7 a.m. Later. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. They all stood up and straightened themselves with a small stretch. Well, that's that, Naruto said. Let's all go home and get some sleep. Rest ourselves. Who died and made you team leader? Sakura asked. Who died? Naruto asked back the question. Never mind. She shook her head quickly. Sasuke merely grunted before he ran and jumped off the roof at the third story and landed nimbly, going home. Naruto did the same by swallow diving off the roof at the adjacent corner, flipped in midair and landed on his feet before performing a perfect PK roll, sprinting home. Sakura shook her head. Show off. I wish I could do that. She took what she figured was the normal way down the stairs and made her way home as well. At home, Naruto finally gathered his things together and changed into something casual. He then placed his last two identical, kerosene-laced, jumpsuits in a trash can outside before striking a match and dropping it in it. The contents inside the bin burst into flames with a flare. New day, and new start he asked himself quietly. Guess so. He walked back into his house and pressed his new outfit before fashioning a small holster inside his weapons pouch for his new tactical weapon. He had a simple dinner before going to bed at 6, just as usual. His eyes snapped open suddenly and flickered around the room, taking in every detail at once. As soon as he gathered his bearings, he slid off the bed to one side and got to his feet. A second later, his clock changed to 6 a.m. and the alarm rang. Before it could annoy him, he turned it off. He stretched while yawning and made his bed quickly before moving on to the kitchen. Laughing to himself about Kakashi's rule, he had a fairly brisk breakfast and some strong unsweetened coffee, before he went and got dressed in his new clothes. He looked himself over in the mirror, satisfied with what he saw. He looked over to the clock to see only half an hour had passed. Well, he's gonna arrive at 10 am. I've got heaps of time. I just need to arm myself and make some surprises too. The guy's a strong Jonin. I could try to catch him off guard. He quickly got his weapons and strapped his blade baton in a holster at his side, the weight of his new weapon giving him a sense of confidence. Lastly, he put on his backpack, filled his toad wallet with money from his savings, and ran out of his apartment. Although he had plenty of time, he had none to waste. Making his way to a tumble-down house in his district, he then navigated his way carefully inside, dodging fallen beams and boards with rusty nails on the floor. He went into the bathroom where there were broken toiletry furnishings and a shower. Reaching for the broken shower rail, he finished yanking it out of the wall and started smashing it against the ceramic tiled walls and floors, breaking the tiles into small pieces. He grunted as he went about the job, almost akin to a wild animal. In a few minutes, he had enough for his purposes. He swept them all up together with his foot into a pile before he took a tin out of his backpack and scooped up all of the preferred pieces inside, which was still more than enough. Having what he needed, he put the tin back in his bag and left the house before sprinting to Higarashi's shop to get his next ingredient. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. He felt deja vu hit him strongly as he inhaled the smells of the shop, but he ignored it. Deja vu hit him too often. Ringing the bell for service, a burly man then stepped out of the back room and strode to the counter. It seemed that with every step closer the man took, Naruto felt like he was going to get pushed out of the shop due to displacement. The man was all muscle and built like a mountain. "Good morning, young man. What can I do for you?" "Good morning. I would like some explosive tags, please," Naruto replied in request. The man stroked his chin with the back of his hand. "Well, what kind of paper bombs? We stock from a rank through to Ds. What's the lowest grade that can still kill or maim?" "My opinion, C. The D ranks, honestly, feel like little more than firecrackers to me. The Cs have a decent blast radius with enough force to blow a man's legs off if he's close enough. Above that, you're just about spreading him all over the place." As if just noticing the boy's size, he asked him if he was a genin, to which the boy admitted. "I wouldn't sell you the B-ranked and A-ranked ones just yet. As a recommendation, you'd need some more experience with them. D and C for now." "As that's so." Naruto took out his wallet and emptied the bills inside. "How much of those C-ranked tags can this get me?" The man scrutinized the pile and sifted through it. He finally pushed back a small amount of the coins back to Naruto, as change. "The here can get you 8 of them. 5-second fuses when chakra activates them. Should give you enough time get far enough away, or curse me out for selling them to you. I'll have earned my living either way, but I'd rather you be careful." Naruto laughed. "Yeah, I'll be careful. I'll take it, Higurashi-san." The man took up the money and put it inside the register before he took down a box behind him from off a shelf. He opened it and counted out the explosives and gave them to Naruto. "Here you go. Take it and welcome." The Uzumaki took them from the man. "Thanks." No sooner than he had taken them from the man, he ran out of the shop. The morning was cool, almost chilly. Naruto was sprinting through the early morning streets, adding his flair to it by doing vaults when necessary, trying to warm up. By the time he had arrived at his next destination, he was warm from his exertions. He walked casually into the next shop, one that had a large sign at the front with the kanji for crafts and toys. The owner inside was an old man whose vision was going, and knowing this, Naruto felt confident that he couldn't recognize him. After exchanging pleasantries, the boy ordered 8 rubber balls about the size of grapefruits, and a large bottle of glue. Quickly paying for it, he went straight home again but went to the roof. He thought back to what he knew. "All right, let's make some surprises." Using a kunai, he cut open a neat circular hole into the top of the ball before proceeding to pour a little glue inside the ball. He then tipped a considerable amount of the tile pieces from his tine into the ball and swirled it around until he could no longer hear any loose ones making noise. The glue was enough to make them all stick to the inside. Taking out an explosive tag, the Uzumaki read the seal on it. As the blacksmith had cautioned, there was a 5-second fuse, and the knowledge merely made him smirk deviously. Balling up the tag, he wrapped it in a bit of aluminum foil paper to protect it from being torn up by the tile pieces and dropped it back inside the ball. Finally, he glued the top of the ball back in its place and wiped away the excess adhesive. The ball now seemed ordinary once more, with nothing depicting it different except for a small weight change. He repeated the process with the rest of the balls and soon had them lined off perfectly. They were simply shrapnel explosives. While normal bombs relied on blast damage, these would rip into flesh, probably right to the bone. And he knew the perfect Jonin to test them out on. A bomb alone won't stop him. Though, I need help. And maybe I can think of something else to take him by surprise. All his preparation done with all last-minute purchases, with everything he would need for the test, he walked hurriedly to Training Ground 7 to find his other two teammates standing around. Morning. The blonde greeted. The last loyal Uchiha grunted in reply while Haruno gave him a nod. She still disliked him, but she didn't want to get on his bad side. Last night when she had asked her mother about Naruto, Mizukii gave her a strict warning about staying away from him as much as she could because he was unstable and dangerous. Given what she had heard from the Anbu regarding the Mizuki betrayal incident, she had no problem believing her. It was going to be hard being on a team with him if things continued like this. We're probably going to wait a while longer before he shows up, Naruto said out of the blue. Sasuke raised his head. Naruto hesitated, did some research on him. He's always 3 hours late to everything. Late for everything, I swear. You better hope you never end up in trouble while waiting for him, or you're screwed. Sakura swooned a little seeing Sasuke's indifference before she realized what Naruto was saying. Wait, he said that he was coming at 7. That means he's coming at 10 a.m. Sakura-san. He instantly fell back into his bored vibe. Oh Kami. Sakura slapped her forehead in exasperation. What should we do until then? Just wait. Sasuke gained a thoughtful look on his face. I still wonder what his test is about. I've got a few theories. Naruto lied as he took off his bag, slouched against the tree his teammates were under, and slid down it, making himself comfortable. Just a few theories. Which are? Sakura asked expectantly. They're just theories. Nothing concrete. Besides, I think we should all just have breakfast while we wait. He trailed off. Somewhat? Sasuke asked, his curiosity now rapidly elevating. Breakfast. Naruto unzipped his bag and took out 2 small kits, as if in response to his question. They all knew about the man's rule, and Sakura was the first to remind them of it. I heard him. What kind of activity could make us vomit anyway? Is he gonna spin us around in circles? Naruto replied, his voice bleeding sarcasm. Who wants to vomit? She retorted. Hey, I think you should eat. I'm going to try to be as clear as possible. Our sensei, who shared so little information about himself, is always late by 3 hours and lied about the test starting at 7, is trustworthy enough to skip breakfast on his say-so. Valid point, the raven-haired boy agreed, and even if we puke, we'll just puke and be done with it. But we all already skipped breakfast, and none of us brought any food. Well, yeah, Sakura agreed. And besides, it's too late to go back to buy food and then have it before sensei comes. Naruto could only marvel at how quickly the girl changed her tune to match Sasuke's. In order to have everyone work together, as far as he realized, he and Sasuke would have to be in accord first. Fangirls. Naruto rolled his eyes, expression jaded as the conversation repeated itself, deja vu ringing in his head. I already had breakfast. But I knew that you all would skip it too, so I brought some. With that said, he retrieved 2 small plastic dishes from the kits and handed each to Sasuke and Sakura, the latter of which took it rather hesitantly. I'm gonna want those back when you're done, they're my only ones. The dark-eyed youth popped the lid off his to find a rice cake inside and a peeled orange cut into 2. Sakura opened hers as well to find the same. Naruto went on to take out 2 more small clear plastic bags that made his teammates' eyes widen a bit. One had 2 large umeboshi plums and the other had 2 ripe tomatoes. They had no qualms taking these from the blonde, and Naruto had to double-check his hands to make sure they didn't just catch fire. He laughed at them both before he took out 2 water bottles and set them on the ground. And that's that. Sasuke started eating immediately while Sakura watched and waited as if she expected something bad was about to happen. The Uzumaki noticed before he lifted an eyebrow. Something wrong, Sakura. Poison maybe. The girl caught his tone and shook her head uneasily. It's just that, I'm not that hungry after all. Her stomach growled suddenly and audibly like an irascible dog, making her male counterparts shake their heads. Sounds like you are. But you're hesitant. Scared I poisoned it, he taunted. It scared her a bit, enough to make her think that he actually had. No, it's just that. Ka-san told you that I'm dangerous, he interrupted, getting to the heart of the matter, am I right? She was shocked to hear this. How did you know? I'm not a well-liked person in the village. If everyone was a shade of gray in the village, I would say that the whites like me while the dark shades or black downright hate me. The vast majority have dark shades. Guess what? Your mother is a dark shade. He replied sagely. Why is that? Sasuke asked between mouthfuls. Meh. Probably my pranks I did before I became 10, he said indifferently. Or a creature that craves mass destruction was sealed in me. Anyway, the food is safe. I'm not gonna poison anyone. Besides, I don't need the notoriety. I don't wanna give them more reason to give me the stink eye, he joked lamely. She shrugged before she started eating. When Sasuke was finished, he moved on the orange and pried it open, only to see some kind of white substance inside. Naruto. Yeah, what's the white powder inside the orange? Sakura became alarmed and was about to spit out her food when the blonde sighed, seeing the girl panic. It's glucose. Oh. They finished eating before they moved on to the water. They finished drinking it and felt more comfortable. They were finishing the dregs when their Jonin sensei came into being via Shunshin in front of them, startling them a bit. Hello, Team 7. Sorry, I'm late. I had to do something important. Naruto cut off. Kakashi didn't hesitate much. Was visiting the memorial stone important? Yes, it was important. Then we can let it slide. Naruto got to his feet and stretched. Do you have to do it every day? Yes, I do. Kakashi realized what he said too late. Naruto turned to his teammates who all shared a nod with each other. Okay. The Uzumaki was fast becoming their spokesman, despite not realizing it. Let's have our test then. I wanna go save a princess and get famous and stuff. Sakura stared at the blonde incredulously with a sweat drop, wondering if it was a boy thing. Kakashi smiled under his mask. Fine. And then the sun came out and the misery shall begin. All right. The test. You will be having a confrontation exam. What kind of confrontation? Sakura asked, becoming nervous. Thought someone would ask. A confrontation against me. He walked over to a small memoriam-esque area and produced an alarm clock out of seemingly nowhere. He wound up the alarm and set it down atop a stump dramatically before turning back to his students. You will be fighting me to get these 2 bells. He took out 2 bells from out of his weapons pouch and strapped it to his waist before he tapped them once, making them ring. You'll be fighting me to get these bells from me. However, all mirth left his voice. The person who doesn't get a bell will be sent back to the academy for further training. But there are only, yes, 2 bells, Sakura. That means that no matter what, one person will not get a bell. The strongest will pass, and it will weed out the weakest out of your group. They all steeled themselves, gathering their confidence and willpower while their sensei went on. You have 2 hours to get them from me. The person who doesn't pass will get tied up and gets to watch the others have lunch. And cue the rumbling stomachs. He didn't get the satisfaction of hearing any. Naruto chuckled a little. All of us had breakfast. No, wait, let me amend that. I had breakfast while I carried food to aid my fellow teammates. Figured you were up to something. Kakashi looked to the shade of the tree and noticed 2 plastic dishes stacked under a tree neatly alongside 2 bottles. I told you if you ate any food, you would vomit. The Uzumaki giggled a little before he turned to his teammates. Guys, remember the powder. Turns out that it wasn't just glucose. What? Oh, calm down, Sakura. It is glucose. It's just that I added some ground up anti-regurgitation medicine in it too, just to make sure that no one would actually vomit. You know, the pills they give bulimic people. So even if you touched your uvula in the back of your throat, your food is staying down, as it should be. Sasuke smirked. Good thinking, Naruto. Naruto shrugged. I also put antidepressants in your water. Quote, quote. I'm joking. Jokes aside, Naruto, by helping them, you've now handicapped your chances of passing without extra competition. And you broke my rule, which is law. That's disobedience. Naruto waved off the man. Nah, it wouldn't be fair. Besides, even so, my big kind heart wouldn't allow it. Besides, we've got brains. Don't get me wrong, we won't be rebellious, but if it's a shit rule, it ought to be broken. Kakashi pondered on the blonde in front of him. He already knows about the importance of having good teamwork and effort. But I still need to go through this test to make sure they all know what it means, especially Sakura having trust in Naruto and less partiality to Sasuke, and the fact that Sasuke seems to prefer parring with Naruto and disliking Sakura for her advances on him. Come at me with the intent to kill. Doing your best will be the only chance you have. Naruto grinned widely. Wow, yeah, he said it. To kill, huh? The grin slightly disturbed the Hitaki, but he shook it off. Yes. Begin. Sasuke threw down a smoke bomb and all left the sensei in the smoke. By the time the smoke cleared, the Jonin was standing alone. Standard by the book evasion tactic from the academy. With a great sigh, he took out his worn edition of Ika Ika Paradise. To the Genin, two of which felt put off by the man's indifference while Naruto just felt, same old, same old. He had his plans. It was straightforward. Get the bells using the knowledge he possessed and to get on his future sensei's good side. He already knew what the test was about, but he needed to make it look realistic, so to speak. He formed the cross ox seal and created a dozen clones to which he handed out his homemade creations. Kakashi, while a Jonin with a lot of experience with his years of being an elite, was going to get the surprise of his life. Hopefully, he wouldn't get absolutely maimed in the process. In the meantime, Sasuke finished setting up his trap and primed the kunai in their places. I'm willing to bet that me and Naruto have the best chance of getting the bells. Right now, Sakura's dead weight. Look at her, in the trees. Why is she watching me instead of Kakashi? He glanced up into the tree where a patch of pink was visible through the leaves. Pathetic. He jumped up into another, much taller tree using chakra and hid there, taking 6 shurikens out of his weapons pouch. Gotta drive Kakashi to the trap. He peeked out tentatively and watched his teacher read while Naruto strode into the clearing across from his teacher. What the hell is he doing? The Uzumaki stopped about 15 meters in front of the teacher, who watched him lazily. Naruto merely shook his head slightly in a placating gesture. So I have to get a bell, huh? Yes, Naruto. Kakashi stared at the boy with the gall to stand before him. May I have a bell, please? Kakashi's sweat dropped. No, you can't. The other two Genin were stumped. Is he retarded? You didn't say I couldn't ask. Geez. Anyway, it's time. Time for what? Naruto reached into his pouch dramatically while everyone watched him. To their surprise, he took out a blue rubber ball. I was getting bored just watching you read that book, and I was wondering, wanna juggle it with me? Kakashi was silent, staring at the blonde. Didn't you have any friends who wanted to do this with you? The Jonin's mind briefly wandered to his past, reminiscing on Obito, who once asked him to juggle the ball with him, using his feet only. Back then, he merely walked away, but now, he was thinking, why not? I'll humor him. He's trying to distract me, I'm sure. Let's see where this goes. Okay, sure. Naruto dropped it onto the flat of his foot and started juggling it. He kicked it twice into the air, then his forehead before he kicked it over to his sensei. Kakashi hesitated before he caught it on his ankle before kicking it as well. The composition is fine. Weight seems normal for a ball like this. There's no chakra in it. But then again, I think this is my first time handling a ball. This could be a trick for all I know. Better knock it back over to him. He briefly juggled it before he kicked it to Naruto. What are your friends doing? Spectating. They probably are. They must be thinking I've got no brains. They started to play a little more aggressively, kicking it to each other with more force each time. Naruto bided his time before he kicked it to Kakashi using chakra in his foot. The man didn't notice, but he kicked to him in a likewise manner, using chakra to augment their strength to get the other to miss a pass. Naruto started counting down the timer in his head, thinking of the bomb inside. 4. Naruto juggled it for a second before passing it to him again. 3. The silver-haired man caught it on his chest before letting it fall to his foot before passing it. 2. Naruto caught it but kept his cool, knowing that the time was brief. He kicked to the Hitaki, trying to not make it look urgent. 1. Kakashi was convinced that this was an ordinary game, but it had to cease. He put in more chakra into his next kick, which would have been more than enough to burst the ball. The millisecond Kakashi's foot struck the ball, the damn thing blew up in a booming explosion. Naruto turned a full 180 degrees and fell flat as pieces of tile flew over his head, and a few embedded themselves in his shoes. A full 5 seconds after the explosion ceased, he sat up and pulled them out before standing up. Oi, Kakashi-sensei. I know you're alive. A hand grabbed his foot from underground. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Double decapitation suicide technique, he was pulled into the ground, only neck and shoulders remaining above. Kakashi reemerged from the ground 2 feet in front of him, eye smiling. That was quite devious. You're a dangerous one, you know that. Did it work? Kakashi made a half and half gesture. I got away with a kawarimi. But I still got some pieces in my foot and one nearly made it into my family jewels. What was it? Ceramic tiles. Made it myself. Naruto chuckled, despite his situation. I thought that shrapnel would get you. So you said you want to make wise decisions, huh? Let's see you get out of that predicament. There was a low thudding noise heard then, coming closer. It sounded exactly like a bouncing ball and Kakashi saw that it was exactly like the one that had nearly maimed him. The man refocused on Naruto who was flexing his muscles inside the hole and broke through. In a few seconds, he was standing outside the hole, covered in dirt. Oh, it was mostly dry dirt. Guess all those push-ups were finally good for something. Kakashi seemed hesitant about the bouncing ball coming towards them. To run would seem cowardly but to stay would hurt, a lot. It bounced closer. He leapt away to what he thought was a safe distance and squinted his visible eye. Naruto caught the ball easily and tossed it from palm to palm, smirking at the Hatake. Confused at the fact that Naruto was handling it so well, he raised an eyebrow. All of a sudden, he had the ball, standing in Naruto's place. The boy had substituted himself with him. Kawarimi. Shit. It blew up on his person again while Naruto was laughing. It's frickin' hilarious. The second time. Fourth time. Shit. Or would it be the fourth time? This future crap is confusing, sometimes. He spun on his heel and ran away in a sprint when he saw Kakashi reading elsewhere while sitting on a rock, looking bemused. He was no coward, but chances that the team passed without his knowledge were unlikely. Well, that's part 1. Now to get my teammates. He leapt up into the trees, landing on the one in between Sasuke and Sakura. Hey, guys. What do you want? Naruto. And what was that thing? They're my homemade improved explosives. But forget that detail. We're going to have to team up to beat him. I don't need a team. Naruto, on his part, completely expected the Uchiha to say that, and he didn't even need his knowledge of the future for it either. He also knew that Sakura would predictably say, yeah. Sasuke-kun's an Uchiha. It followed through exactly. Despite it being the same as before, he thought her answer to be especially disappointing. He sighed internally as he made up his mind to let things run their course for a while longer, then he'd return to them. A short 10 minutes later, one of Naruto's clones was slapping Sakura awake in the face while another clone had to use a kawarimi with Sasuke who was a victim to the double decapitation suicide technique. Now, they were more compliant and ready to listen. Alright, Sasuke. We're going to fight Kakashi-sensei in Taijutsu from in front of him and behind him. Keep pressure on him. Sakura and a few of my clones will be throwing kunai from flank positions at sensei from the side. He's bound to make a mistake at some point. I also have around 3 more clones from behind Kakashi throwing my bombs. That reminds me. Here. He took out 2 balls from his bag and gave one each to his teammates. Just focus your chakra into them and they'll explode. 5-second fuse. Use your own discretion about when to use them. Sasuke hefted it in his hand to gauge for its weight while Sakura seemed hesitant at holding one of the bombs that even had their Jonin teacher wary of them. Won't they hurt us? Naruto shook his head. So long as you throw them at him and run like hell, you'll be fine. Just make sure you turn your back to it. You wouldn't want the shrapnel to dig into your face. She paled visibly before she put it away. But the 2 of you are going to fight him up close. Her statement held them, and it provoked the Uzumaki. I know what you're thinking. You think we're gonna take the bells for ourselves, especially since you're supporting us from afar. Frankly, our team sucks. I want all of us to move up, but we're all holding each other back. You don't want to be on a team with me, I don't want to be on a team with you, and Sasuke doesn't want to be on a team with anybody. It's so bad that we'd want to go back to the academy just because we can't be bothered with the dynamic. So worst comes to worst, we can all use the bomb balls to take out the one we don't want to pass. They were silent. Okay. Too serious. How about we rock paper scissors for the bells later, then? They remained silent until Sakura finally broke it. It's an awful world. I think, she said, thinking about Iruka, Mizuki, and Naruto, the wildcard who had concerned himself with the welfare of Team 7. She would prefer Sasuke on a team any day, but perhaps Naruto wouldn't be so bad either. I might not make the cut next year, and even if I do, I want good teammates. So if I have to, I'll fight the two of you for a bell. That squeezed a smile out of Naruto. Don't worry. If we kill Emo Eyepatch out there, we'll need you to replace him. Alright then. He beckoned. Let's go get him, Sasuke. Uzumaki. They both leapt into the clearing, the middle of which stood the confident Genin. Sasuke dashed straight towards him while Naruto flanked the man, running to get behind him and into his blind spot. Kakashi backpedaled a little to try and keep Naruto in view but retired from the effort to focus on the Uchiha who was picking up momentum to perform a straight punch. The man caught the hand easily at the wrist and wrenched the boy's arm harshly, making the boy groan in pain. He brought his right foot with a sweeping kick to the Jonin's side, but the man stopped it by blocking with his right hand, flexing it in a V. By this time, Naruto had made it behind him and seemed deliberate to wait until the man was fully occupied with Sasuke. Once that was achieved, he took out a kunai and lunged forward to stab the man in the back. In a blur, the man was no longer busying himself with Sasuke and deflected the knife with his steel wrist protector. Not daunted, he swung the knife into a reverse grip and started slashing with it. Kakashi kept dodging each arc of the blade, practically dancing out of danger each time. 4 kunai sailed through the air, flying towards the man from both sides. He rapidly took out his kunai and deflected them, letting them fall harmlessly at his feet. Sasuke now recovered some use in his hand, grabbed the man's kunai arm at the elbow while reaching another hand at the bells. At the same time, Naruto threw his kunai, aiming at the man's heart. In tandem, from all around the field, more kunai were hurled at the man again, plus additional shuriken. It seemed that the man had no way out. They all embedded themselves in his upper torso, but he poofed away and left a log in his place, signaling a replacement jutsu. Shit. Substitution. Naruto and Sasuke looked around sharply before they heard slow clapping. They turned to find their sensei stroll into the clearing. Congratulations. You forced me to do a kawarimi because of too much interference. Sasuke shut his eyes momentarily, thinking about his second close encounter with the bells. Meanwhile, Naruto was yelling at the man at the top of his lungs for what could be called a coward's move. Well, it's a useful technique. And isn't the pot calling the kettle black? Kakashi I smiled. But to the aspiring Genin, it was more of an eye smirk. Throwing caution to the wind, the 2 Genin males ran at their teacher, intent on getting the bells, no matter the cost. They both engaged in a brief bout in Taijutsu, but while the boys were on offense, Kakashi was playing strict defense, dodging what he couldn't and deflecting what he couldn't. It irked them a little, but they refused to give in the towel. Finally, Naruto abandoned his stance and made a diving tackle at the man with his hands going forward, yelling at the top of his lungs. Hatake sidestepped him and engaged Sasuke while avoiding some flying shuriken. Naruto fell onto his arms first and performed a PK roll before quickly getting up, turning sharply on his left foot while he reached into his weapons pouch on his waist. He took out the handle and swiped it down rapidly to make it extend. With it in one hand, he made a diagonal slash at Kakashi's back. While Kakashi's skills had dulled somewhat over the years, he knew by instinct to dodge a blade when he sensed the air behind him getting cleaved. He sidestepped the predicted path of the blade while turning sideways to get a good look at it. It was like nothing he had never seen before. Unfortunately, in his moment of curiosity, Sasuke had drawn a kunai and slashed it at Kakashi's gut, with all of his strength behind it. Kakashi saw it coming and clumsily deflected it with his steel wrist protector. The kunai slid haphazardly across it and cut into the cloth of the glove, leaving blood trails on his knuckles. Still in shock that a Genin actually scored a hit against him, the Uzumaki quickly turned the tactical weapon to the blunt side facing the sensei and swung it as hard as he could, aiming for the man's lower back. With a yell of effort, he smashed the weapon into the man's back with enough force to break it. The man exploded into a large plume of smoke that grew in volume and covered the area the males were in. They quickly ran out when they realized that the man had used a kawarimi while using some smoke bombs. Sasuke looked like he was running low on stamina. Naruto grumbled to himself. They'd done enough, and it was time to end the exam. Gesturing to the Uchiha, he pointed at the ground and removed his bomb ball from his weapon's pouch. Realizing that Naruto was indicating that the man was below the ground, he took out his own explosive, activated it, and dropped it, as Naruto did for his. Sakura in the trees saw what they were doing. She decided that she'd do the same, particularly because she couldn't see Kakashi but thought they did and were trying to flush him out. She threw hers as well, and it bounced right into the smoke. The two boys sprinted out of the clearing, trying to get the hell out of ground zero before the three bombs went off. By the time Kakashi came out of the ground for the last time only to find no one there, all he saw were 3 blue rubber balls. Despite having been a boy soldier on the battlefield, he might get PTSD from bouncing balls after this. Kakashi plucked a piece of tile from his jacket and dropped it on the ground at his feet, making a clink sound. Those balls are nasty explosives. Naruto was tossing one of the now dreaded bomb balls up and down in a single hand. You are a Jonin after all. Besides, you're still alive, aren't you? I'm a little upset. I was trying to kill you, just like you wanted. Your words, not mine. In response, Kakashi plucked out another shard from the collar of his vest, just short of his neck. He held it out to the boy to emphasize how close he came to getting killed. Ah, walk it off. Sasuke and Sakura sat next to each other for the first time, one giving off a celebratory vibe, the other a smug one. Naruto fist pumped the air in one of his brief moments of emotion. So, good enough to pass, right sensei? You failed to get the bells. So no one passes. He frowned like a thunder cloud. Bullshit. This was a team effort. Naruto piped up. We knew that it was because no team can have only 2 genin and 1 jonin instructor. Besides, even if a genin got a bell, given the proximity of the 2 bells, they would have gotten the second in the same attempt. They would have to share a bell anyhow. Worst comes to worst, we 3 will stay together and get another teacher. How do I sound? He didn't answer. Anyway, on a side note, didn't you say that who gets a bell passes? Kakashi narrowed his visible eye in scrutiny. The other 2 genins were confused. Yes, I did. Well, I guess I pass regardless. He reached into his weapons pouch and retrieved 2 bells. The others looked at them in shock before they looked to Kakashi's waist, noticing the lack of said bells. The boy looked bored again. I cut them off your waist when I dived at you with the kunai. Didn't you notice that you're not making any jingle sounds when you move? The look on the Hataki's waist, while priceless, told him that he indeed had. I got the bells, I passed. He walked over to his teammates and handed each of them a bell. Now they're getting bells, they pass too. No one said that I had to hold onto the bells to pass. Your test statement was flawed. Sakura and Sasuke weren't sure if that idea was even plausible, but the Hatake decided to accept it. They did show evidence of teamwork after all. It was a good sign, and he would be willing to try with them. All right. You were right. The test was about teamwork in the first place and you seem to work together fine. Sakura distracting me with throwing weapons, Naruto and Sasuke fighting me with Taijutsu, but there's one thing I don't understand. What's that? Who threw the ball bomb when you were stuck in the ground? Naruto replied that he had been using clones. And Kage Bunshins were helping Sakura with the throwing weapons, correct? The silver-haired man sighed as he stroked the side of his face. Well, good for you. I couldn't kawarimi very well when I had just gotten out of the ground halfway. You all got very lucky. I knew exactly when you were vulnerable. I knew. And the Uzumaki raised an eyebrow. You all pass. I christen this squad as Team 7. However, his tone grew serious. All those who abandon the rules are trash. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. I want you all to remember that. You're all unequally partial to each other now, but I'll keep all 3 of you together and see how you grow. We won't let you down, Sensei, Sakura said. There was a brief moment of silence that Naruto soon broke. Can I get the food in one of the bentos now? I'm really hungry. Naruto walked around the corner and stood, leaning against the wall. He waited. After idling for a few minutes, he wondered about Ayame's gambling. Maybe he shouldn't warn her. Nah, my heart's too big. He waited. Gonna be a big scrap today, and Sasuke and Sakura are gonna get hurt today. I should make that clone early. Maybe while Kakashi's signing us out. No, before that, I don't want him to see me making it. Shortly after this, he was out of things to ponder on and grew impatient. Come on, Tora, hurry it up. I've got to get that C-ranked mission today. He waited some more. Finally, after what felt like an eternal version of 10 minutes, a cat with a red ribbon around its neck ran right around the corner and into a cardboard box that had a few holes in it. The cat was running at full tilt and it had no chance to react to the box trap it bounded right into. As soon as it was inside the box, the boy simply shut the lid and hefted the box up to carry it close to his chest. Naruto. He heard in his earpiece, "Do you have the target?" Naruto immediately lifted a finger to the earpiece that kept him in touch with the other members of Team 7. Sheesh, it's only a cat. I got Tora. Let's all just meet up back at the Hokage's office, huh? TCH, you're such a spoilsport, Naruto. Alright, my cute Genin, let's all get to the office. As soon as he received Kakashi's confirmation, Naruto turned off his earpiece. He didn't need to hear Sakura's banter with Kakashi going on again for the second time today. One time was bad enough. With both hands underneath the box, he began making his way to the Hokage's tower. It was a bit of a journey but nothing that couldn't be solved with a brisk walk. Along the way, crowds parted for him as if he were an important official no one wanted to cross, but he knew better. It got a bit worse since the incident, he muttered to himself. No doubt because of me and Gigi's decision to come clean. Tora meowed and scratched at the sides of the box slightly in discomfort. Are you agreeing with me, Tora? He whispered. Meow. I'll look out for you a little. It'll benefit me more in the long term, anyway. This D-ranked mission's getting on my nerves, and you won't quit running away from your owner. Balancing the box on one arm, he took a small piece of pre-wrapped salted fish out of his pocket with the other and dropped it in the box. He silently delighted in hearing the cat fuss over the treat. He was walking past the ramen stand now when he heard someone call his name loudly from the establishment. Without even looking back to the caller, he merely yelled back his answer. No. Losses. Don't bet. Ayame Nichan. The said person seemed to be satisfied with the answer as they didn't say anything more. To an outside onlooker, the person would probably lift an eyebrow at the lack of any substantial information gained by eavesdropping. Naruto thought it was better that way. He didn't need anyone to even suspect what he could do, what he knew. Without any delay whatsoever, he reached his destination quickly. By some strange chance, all the members of Team 7 arrived at the same time, with nary a passing word to each other. This didn't bother Kakashi any at all. For some reason, the team was closer through the silence than through speech. Naruto's replies were too sarcastic and salty sometimes. Sasuke only spoke when he thought it was necessary, and Sakura had come to understand that she didn't have much say in a team in which she had the least to contribute. Kakashi thought it was worrying. He hoped they would get along better, or he might have to address the issue. The Hatake broke out of his musings when he realized that they were now in front of the Sandame. Mission accomplished. Hokage-sama. Tora was retrieved. The cage took his pipe from his mouth as he released a puff of the smoke. That's record time, even for your squad, Kakashi-san. Improvement is good. He gestured to his genin. Naruto. The cat. The boy obliged and took out the docile cat of the box. The cat allowed itself to be manhandled and started to purr when Naruto started to stroke it behind the ears and neck. The others were slightly surprised at the scene, for by all accounts, Tiger was a bit savage with the other teams, even with Sakura and Sasuke. Alright. The Sandame quickly sent Sakura to bring the daimyo's wife from another room so she could get her cat back. Upon entering, the woman rushed to Naruto, making the cat tense up. Oh, Tora. My darling cat. Naruto turned sideways to the woman, preventing her from taking the cat from him, trying to ignore the cat's claws that were digging into his hands. It wanted to make a break for it. Excuse me, young man. My cat, please. Hold on. He stroked the cat a few more times in an effort to calm it. Finally achieving that, he fully turned back to the woman. Good morning. She tapped her foot in slight impatience. Good morning. Does the cat run away from you often? She hesitated briefly. Yes. Why are you asking this? As the cat trying to get out of my hands. She begrudgingly admitted the fact, and Naruto tried to keep stoic. Anything else would get him into trouble. Good woman, bad owner. I could do something about that. He handed the cat to the woman who took it, now confused. The second she grasped the creature, it scratched her hands to get her to let go. As she did, the cat dropped to the ground and climbed up the Uzumaki's pant leg, back into his arms. The cat dislikes your treatment of it. It's fairly obvious. I treat Tora with the best I have to offer. He raised a hand to stop her. Let me stop you right there. That's not what I meant. The whole time, the others in the room were fretting in some degree, hoping that the damned blonde didn't botch things up for Konoha. The Sandame kept a cool exterior, however. He trusted Naruto to make wise and smart decisions. He had done so thus far, based on various situations both social and combat-wise for the past month. Worst case scenario, if he spoiled things, Naruto would have to shoulder his own blame and be punished according to what the daimyo would think is best. I treat her well. No, you don't. While you clearly lavish it with food and beauty care and whatnot, the cat wants affection and you're not doing it right. He started stroking the cat slowly and gently, making the cat purr audibly. Do you hear her purring? I want to give her back, but if you don't, she'll keep running away and trying to find me, he tried to joke with a smile. Do as I do. For the next 3 minutes, Naruto lectured her and taught her how to treat the cat. At the end of it all, Tora was snug in her mistress's arms and she was marveling at the fact. Your cat probably won't run away anymore. You're welcome. The woman smiled broadly. Thank you, young man. She walked out, cooing sweet nonsense to the cat. Naruto wondered if he'd made a cat lady out of the woman, and shivered. And that's that. Yes. The Sandame slightly grinned. That takes care of that little issue. Besides, we don't get money for doing missions for Daimyo Dono and his wife. We were expected to do it for free. I know. That's why I did it. Besides, I think the cat was starting to grow on me. Didn't want to wish bad for it. The Sandame moved on. Well enough. Are you already done for today, or would you like another D rank? Excuse me, just a minute, Naruto interrupted, talking before Kakashi could. We've had 25 consecutive D rank missions. We're now eligible for AC rank 1, and I wanna save a princess. A pretty one. That is if sensei believes we're ready. I do. He didn't need much thought to consider it. Doing D ranks wasn't working for improving their dynamic. Perhaps they ought to go on a mission outside the walls, it could bring them closer and should be better than awkward radio silences. Hiruzen nodded. Tazuna-san. You may enter. The door opened after a moment, letting in a man seemingly in his early 60s who swayed a little as he walked. There was a glass flask sticking out of his hip pocket and he smelled strongly of alcohol. Sakura giggled behind a hand. That's no princess. Good morning, Hokage-sama. So this is the team of ninjas who are escorting me to Wave. Looks like a bunch of brats who don't even know how to wipe their own noses. How are they supposed to protect me? I expected adult ninjas. To his credit, Naruto didn't even look surprised, something that Kakashi took note of. The boy smiled grimly, as if he knew a damaging secret and wouldn't tell. Your lack of confidence in us is acknowledged. If you'd prefer, there is an alternative of you going solo. You could break your bottle over a bandit's head to defend yourself. He pointed at the bottle, which the man had the decency to poke it back inside his pocket to conceal it. Hope you travel safely. The man hesitated, catching the boy's drift. He's saying take it or leave it. If I go with them, there's a good chance that the Jonin guy could just do most of the work anyway. If only I had more money, I could just hire more, better ninja. What's your answer, Tazuna-san? Hiruzen queried as he handed a scroll to Kakashi, who began reading it. The man sighed. We'll depart at noon. I wish to leave as soon as possible. I've wasted enough time. Kakashi nodded, having already read the stipulations from the scroll. Supposed to be a textbook bodyguard mission. Very well. Hokage-sama, we accept the mission. Team 7, go home and pack for a week. Meet at the main gate at 10 minutes before noon. At 10 minutes before the hour, Naruto dropped from a nearby roof and rolled neatly in a PK roll, right in front of his teammates in charge who had arrived before him. In one of those rare times, Kakashi was early and currently logging their information with the gate guards so they could leave. Show off. Sakura muttered, you didn't have to. It can dissipate 2,400 pounds of force. Rolling comes easy to me and is very useful, even while fighting. Naruto defended, using a fact he'd picked up from a book somewhere. Use less chakra for cushioning. Besides, I think it looks pretty good. Sasuke merely shook his head. HN. His grunt sounded as if he was agreeing with what Naruto said. Or not. Regardless of what it was, Naruto wanted to tell him to off if he wasn't going to use his words. Kakashi finally finished logging them, and with a curt goodbye to the gate guards, the team left the village, looking back at it as it decreased in size as the distance grew. All the Genins at present felt an air of adventure while Kakashi was indifferent. Tazuna walked in front with Sasuke at his side while Sakura and Kakashi walked behind the two and slightly to the sides. Naruto was at the very back, bringing up the rear. They were now quite far in the journey before Sakura broke the silence and asked what she could expect from Wave Country. While the bridge builder began to spin tales about the country in its heyday, Naruto began thinking about the events that would take place today. In fact, in his mind, he was accurately timing everything, right down to the second, while pondering if anything would change for the better. Or for the worse. There were going to be changes. There had to be. Soon, they came upon a wide puddle to the side of the road which all took care to not step in, avoiding getting their sandals wet. As soon as they passed it, a scythe seemingly materialized from it and spun in the air as it made a beeline for the Jonin of the group. As the man turned to look at it, the reaping tool decapitated him and continued on its way. Kakashi's head fell with a thud as blood spewed from his neck. The body, not realizing it was dead, continued walking a few more steps before it collapsed, blood spilling from it like a barely stopped up bottle. Kakashi-sensei. The Pinkett gasped as she saw her teacher get brutally killed. Tazuna, in a similar sense, was already panicking that he would soon share the same fate. Naruto and Sasuke leapt to the adjacent sides of the small water body to dodge the scythe as it made a round trip and returned to the puddle. A hand reached up out of it and caught it at the handle as a figure emerged from it. Two more followed, and it was shown that they all had slashed Kurigakure headbands that showed that they had declared themselves missing nin. They were all attired somewhat the same, but the second and third had clawed gauntlets that seemed to have poison dripping off them. One down. The man with the scythe grinned in a smirk as he regarded the dead man. And the rest will follow. Naruto saw it as an attempt to hurt their morale. Kakashi-sensei's an elite ninja. He's not dead. Naruto mouthed the words to his teammates who set their faces. Sakura placed herself in front of Tazuna and took out a kunai. Theory taught her to do this. She didn't know anything practical yet, but she needed to do something while her male counterparts would do most of the grunt work. Watch out. They're using poison. At the boy's shout, the three men lunged at the four people. Both of the men with gauntlets rushed Sasuke and Naruto while the last with the scythe ran at Sakura. Slightly panicking, she threw her kunai at the man to stop him or mostly slow him down. The man merely turned sideways while running, dodging it while not slowing down in the least. Naruto muttered curses as the scythe-toting man passed him to get to the kunoichi and Tazuna. He was about to try and intercept the man, but he had to abandon when a clawed metal hand nearly raked his chest, stopping him in his tracks. Sakura took out 6 shurikens and threw them as hard as she could, but the man laughed as he deflected all of them easily while making a show of it, using the handle. This is all Konoha has to offer. Just run along, little girl, or I'll kill you along with the bridge builder. He flipped the scythe deftly to make a reaping motion and raised it over his head to swing it. As he brought it down in a diagonal slash, she ducked to the inside of it, trying to stay clear of it. As the momentum of the weapon brought it down, he tilted the handle and slammed it into her forehead. Fortunately, it was mostly negated because it had struck her Hitai-8, but the pain of it was almost concussive. To her growing horror, she began to see doubles and the man readied to swing the weapon again as hard as he could. She had lost her depth perception and silently prayed for her sensei to intervene. Suddenly, a dark blur appeared in front of her. For a fleeting moment, she thought that Sasuke was going to save her and how romantic it was, but then she realized that the shade of the color was too dark. Naruto stood between the two, and as the weapon was brought down, the boy merely used his left hand and did a back-handed fist to the man's wrist, making the weapon veer off to the side. The blade dug into the ground, and before the man could react and shake it out quickly, Naruto kicked the man in his crotch with the toes of his sandal. The man screamed in agony, mouth wide open, and Naruto quickly took out a ball and stuffed it in the man's mouth. His anguished cries now muffled and doubling over in pain, Naruto grabbed by the hand and elbow and quickly dragged him away into the undergrowth. A few seconds later, an explosion erupted with them at the focal point, blood, gore, and organ matter splattering some of the surrounding areas. Sakura and Tazuna stared wide-eyed at the scene, both not daring to believe that the blonde had perished. Did Naruto just sacrifice himself to save me? Oi! Sakura, look alive, these two are still trying to kill Tazuna-san. She turned to look to where the voice was coming from, only to see Sasuke and Naruto still fighting the men with what looked like poisoned gauntlets. Despite the situation, she couldn't help but sweat drop at her error. It must have been a clone. She touched her head lightly. Her head was still aching, but the pain was already fading. Tazuna-san, please stay behind me. The man nodded as he continued to stare at the four combatants fighting. He was still confused as to the fact that the boy was still alive. In the meantime, Sasuke had abandoned his interceptor fist taijutsu to use a kunai to try and parry the man's gauntlet. He realized that if so much as receive a scratch, the fight might as well be forfeit. Gozu kept up the pressure in the fight by launching his shuriken chain at the boy, aiming at his chest. He leapt to one side to avoid it and threw his kunai at the Chunin, still trying to keep his distance. Gozu started retracting the chain and in the process, deflected the tossed knife with his metal glove. On the other hand, Naruto had no qualms being within arm's reach of his opponent. He was in the best place, so far as he was concerned. Try as he might, every time Mizu swung his left-hand gauntlet, by the time the attack was executed, Naruto simply wasn't in the spot anymore. He couldn't launch his shuriken chain because the boy would simply dodge it, given his current capabilities. In frustration, he lunged forward with it, straight at the boy's chest. Finally spotting the opening he was waiting for, Naruto quickly took out a kunai in his right hand and ducked, turned on one foot to avoid the man's straightforward attack. As he crouched, he stabbed the man in the side with the kunai as hard as he could, right up until his foe hand hilt gripping the knife slammed the man, preventing the kunai from progressing any further. The kunai had slid in right between the ribs and the man could already feel his lungs starting to fill with blood. He stopped, stock still to decide if he could still live if he abandoned the fight, but his wandering mind was brought back to the battlefield when Naruto pulled out his kunai. The man started bleeding profusely and Naruto quickly took out his baton blade and swiped it out to release the catch. Before Mizu could react properly, his kneecap got broken. Gah! He fell on his still intact knee and grasped the other, yelling in pain. Without any further hesitation, Naruto, using substantial effort, brought the blunt side down, crashing onto the man's head, feeling the man's head cave in a little with the sound of his skull breaking. The man ceased his screaming and crumpled in a heap on the ground. Gozu saw all the events that had befallen his brother out of the corner of his eye and turned to gaze at his brother's apparent death, unbelieving. Mizu. He ran over to the man and shook his shoulder slightly as if trying to wake him up. Everyone else could only stare at the incensed man, at his shock and Naruto's almost indifference. I know what you would have done to us, who you would have killed. Not Sakura, not Sasuke, not any of us today. That's my choice, my intervention. Naruto growled to himself in frustration. I've done enough. Screw the consequences of changing events. He unsealed two water balloons from a seal at his waist and chucked them at the two men. The balloons broke on impact and the contents splashed over the two men, making Gozu bawl for his eyes. Sakura watched the man scream long and loud before she smelt a mysterious smell in the air. As that, kerosene. The blonde shook his head. No, it's oil paint thinner. He looked over to Sasuke and gestured over at the two men on the ground with his head. There's not really a difference between the two. The last loyal Uchiha got the hint and smirked. He quickly went through hand seals, ending on Tiger. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Instead of blowing a projectile fireball, he did a constant stream, and for the rest of his life, all Gozu's world was on fire. His screams soon died down at the same time Kakashi came out, looking at the mostly disheveled Genin. Whoa, my cute little Genin are getting carried away with murder. Don't you think you've gone overboard? That's not murder, it was mostly self-defense, Sasuke argued. They were out to kill us. And if things were different, they basically killed you first. We retaliated. The man in the fire screamed again before going silent for the last time. We might have gone overboard, but it's not murder, Naruto said as if they hadn't been interrupted by the man's dying woes. Sakura looked to Kakashi's body, only to find a log with a small piece of it cut off at the top. Kakashi-sensei, why didn't you help us? What if Naruto hadn't helped me? I would have stepped in. I just wanted you all to get some first-hand experience in this line of work. Besides, all of you performed well, using all of your capabilities. The pinkett at the moment felt little more than dead weight, but her Jonin teacher said helped her with her esteem a little. She shrugged it off and turned to the blonde. Naruto, thanks for saving me just now. But why do you carry paint thinner with you? I carry lots of things. I also have regular water balloons, essence of pepper mixed in water, dirt, and so on. I never know when I need stuff like this. Like starting a fire, blinding people, things like that. I even have a stuffed toy or two. Makes for good distractions. Like when I distracted Sensei last week with the plush toy. The distraction only lasted for a second. Kakashi defended. Still made you look the other way. Elite ninja, they call you. Maybe I'll get to be Hokage pretty young at this rate. Sounds more like household items to me. Sasuke butted in. To which Naruto argued that they were cheap and effective. Tazuna trembled at the sight of the two men burning, their charred corpses now visible in the dying flames. These are kids. They're making light of what they just did. He turned to the team, only to see them staring at him. What's wrong? Kakashi was the one to reply. The one with the scythe said he was out to kill you. He was going to kill you and threatened to kill Sakura as well. As well. That means they were out for just you and we were merely interferences. He struggled to think of a lie. Tazuna-san, is there any particular reason why missing nins would be after you? These two men here, Kakashi gestured to the dead men, their bodies smoldering, are the demon brothers, Gozu and Mizu. They are missing nins from Kiri. What about the guy with the scythe? Sakura asked. I didn't recognize him. He was probably a small fry, so he didn't have a bingo book entry. Or he wasn't updated yet. And you'll never get the chance to recognize him, Sasuke remarked, eyeing the gore-filled and bloody mess in the undergrowth with a bit of disgust. That bomb blew him to pieces. Naruto shrugged, refusing to be judged for what he did. I'll try to make my work cleaner next time. What are you not telling us, Tazuna? Kakashi pressed. The older man sighed in resignation. I've been marked for death, by an evil man named Gato. Not everything can be so black and white, Tazuna-san. Naruto interrupted. He is evil. I doubt the man has ever suckled human milk. He steals and sells women into prostitution, kills the people who oppose him, burns down whichever house he pleases, and can get away with it all. Everyone's scared to go against him because theirs is no law. Even if there was, I doubt anyone would testify, and if they did, he's rich enough to buy silence and bribe officials. Even if that fails, he could be broken out by his army of hooligans, bandits, and thieves. Kakashi took a moment to consider what the man was saying. I understand all of this. I've heard stories and rumors of his notoriety. But why would he want to kill you? The Hitaki pressed. He controls all the trade routes by the sea when my home, the land of waves, depends on these routes for supplies and trades. Because he monopolizes this, he leaves us to fend for ourselves, left with the dregs and exorbitant prices over which he has power. We almost live like animals. None of the members of Team 7 responded audibly. Their hearts went out to those of the country, imagining the picture which the man was painting in their heads. I wish to build a bridge that connects us to the mainland. If we could get it built, we could do our own trading and save Nami no Kuni. Now you're being foolish, old man. Excuse me. All eyes turned to the blonde speaker. Let's say you build the bridge. Yay. Everyone's happy. Then Gato comes and controls the bridge. Makes things easier for him, because he wouldn't have to use ships anymore. Hell, maybe he demolishes it. It would be a waste of time and effort. Then he turns around and kills the people who made it out of spite. It's a massive waste. But for the bridge to even get finished, we'd have to protect you while you build it, as well as protect your coworkers. They might have bad morale, so they could take a long time. And you say he practically has his own army. While they could be unskilled, the way you mentioned them, it sounds like there's a lot of them. We've got skill on our side, but we'd be way outnumbered. Little strokes fell great oaks, Sakura mumbled the quote, getting apprehensive about the entire situation. They'd eventually crowd us and kill us. So what are you saying, Naruto? We cut our losses and go back to the leaf? Kakashi asked. I didn't say that. We can probably handle the army. Along with some help, he said pointedly, referring to his usage of clones. What I'm saying is that the mission detail needs some adjusting. Sasuke leaned against a tree, expecting that Kakashi would probably carry them back home to the leaf. Which is assassination. We're ninjas. We do anything it takes to ensure a mission's success, even if it means blinding ourselves if the client doesn't like us staring at him. We have to kill Gato to make sure that he doesn't sabotage and get us later. Kakashi finished silently. He looked at his sensei's son and trembled internally at the uncanny reasoning between the two. It was a facet that made the man so dangerous, and it was present in the boy in front of him. His face hardened so much that it was as if it were chiseled out of granite. So do all of you agree to help Tazuna-san? To be clear, you're not expected nor obligated to help him because he omitted important info from the mission detail. It's not even a C-ranked mission anymore, on account of these Chunins showing up. It's B-rank now. So long as no other ninjas show up, except for just bandits, I think it's all right, Sakura said, though knowing that she'd have to hope that Kakashi would bear a lot of the burden. If the others refused, however, then she wouldn't insist. These Chunins could be the only ninjas to lay waste while the army of bandits is in Nami no Kuni. I'll stay on the mission. I'll stay too. It was getting boring back at home, anyway, Sasuke said. I couldn't agree more, Sasuke. Fighting really gets the blood pumping, the Uzumaki said lightheartedly, almost a full 180 feet from his previous serious vibe. He created 6 shadow clones and gave them orders to clean up, while the group went on in their journey. They were all silent, but Kakashi was perhaps the most thoughtful. That's another incident when Naruto was fully prepared to deal with. I don't expect a genin to sense anyone from that puddle of water, much less prepared to act. He saved Sakura with a clone I sensed following us shortly after we left the gates. He must have created it then. How and why would he do that unless he predicted trouble that he himself couldn't intervene in? Was he just being cautious, or can Naruto predict the future? He discreetly glanced at the boy. He's never been wrong in a choice unless I noticed it deliberate. He knows how to fight me in advance. He also seems to enjoy finishing other people's sentences. Anyone can do those things with talent and practice. Maybe even a lucky streak, but Naruto needs some observing. After all, look at how he profiled himself when the team was formed. Maybe I'll ask him when the time's right. I don't even know if I'm hoping if I'm wrong. Sakura was also lost in thought. He saved me. Ka-san must have been wrong about him cause he's never done anything wrong, at least, not that I know of. He's always looking out for me and Sasuke. Maybe she's talking about how he kills people. He blew the man up with a bomb and helped Sasuke by burning a man to death. He even said he likes fighting. He did say he was bored at home. She tapped her head testily. All the pain from earlier was gone and she was grateful. I've never heard of a ninja who doesn't kill. It's not a good thing, but the scythe guy nearly killed me. Naruto's a good person even though he can be a little brutish. Naruto glanced at Sakura. She's safe. And Sasuke's alive. At least that I was able to ensure that we got out okay, but I don't know the consequences of what I did. Not knowing is dangerous. Ignorance nearly killed me when I stole the scroll of Kinjutsu and Itaruka killed. Just when he promised that he would look out for me the week before. He didn't deserve to die. He died trying to save me. This damn knowledge. Is it a blessing, or a curse? It's useful, but I hate having to second guess things like this, and it's binding my life in only one direction. He stared out in front of him, his eyebrows furrowing. He realized that things were changing, and he was vulnerable. I'll try to make the most of it. The ferry ride was unearthly quiet. Anyone could claim that it was peaceful and tranquil, but to those who were on the said ferry, they thought that in silence this concentrated, the slightest pin drop would be akin to an explosion. Sakura stared out into the thinly veiled fog, trying to see if she could see land. She was visibly nervous and kept well away from the edge of the large boat. Regardless, if one thing was certain, the least she could do was make herself useful and announce if she saw land. It simply wouldn't do to suddenly run aground. Sasuke talked quietly to Tazuna, who spoke back in hushed tones. The Uchiha had thought it wise to try and find out more about Gato, what kind of organization he had, and the people who answered to him. So far, Tazuna was only able to tell him estimates of the number of thugs he bossed and what kind of weapons they wielded. They were nothing impressive, he noted. If anything, they were like ants. It was easy to kill or take out one, even several. But there was an obvious reason why people didn't go around disturbing anthills. Kakashi continued to read his worded smut and continued to steal glances over the book at his most intriguing charge, Naruto. The boy was seated on a wooden bench nailed to the floor of the boat and napped with his head in his lap. The Uzumaki seemed contented with his current situation, and by Kakashi's reasoning, resting was a good idea. Who knew when they would get another chance to do so? Besides, it invigorated the mind as well as the body. But that was not the most interesting issue. For the past 2 hours since the fight with the 3x Mist Nin, he started to suspect that Naruto was able to see into the future, or at the very least, was able to predict it. The lad had done some interesting things, said some interesting things, and now, if he was right, what was he supposed to do about it? If he can't predict the future, then he had a bizarre winning streak to never be wrong, chalked up to be some sort of blessing from Kami or some underhanded trick from the Shinigami, because he doubted that the Kyuubi would have some ability or talent like that. Foresight and luck were usually applied to birds and rabbits in lore, cunning and trickery only belong to foxes. If he can predict the future, then would it be a boon? Or would it be something terrible? Opinion. He could be a fantastic shinobi, always knowing when, how, and where to strike and preventing the injury or death of any comrade. On the other hand, he would be specifically targeted for such a gift. Foresight could only get one so far. What if, one day, all he would see was that there was no way out? Dangerous thoughts there, Kakashi. Pull it together, the man thought. This is still based on a massive if that he can see the future. He looked to where he sensed the shoreline would be and saw it. Out of the corner of his eye, however, he saw that his female Genin student was still staring out, trying to find it. She was young. She saw a lot, but couldn't notice things as well as he could. I should let her have this. Don't want her to think she's incompetent. Hey, Sakura, do you see land anywhere? Can't wait to get off and stretch, he remarked, smiling. Spying the nearing coast, she nodded. Yes, Kakashi-sensei. I see it. It's about 50 meters ahead of us. Tazuna looked up from his mostly one-sided conversation with Sasuke and turned to the ferryman and his assistant. Hear that, Bodo and Gyo? The middle-aged man looked up from his rowing at the stern of the boat, as did his son. We knew where it was. The man gave a piano-like grin. We knew 'cause of experience. Hell, we could take a boat out on a moonless night and still find our way round. Ain't that so, Mboy? Of course, San. Ease up on your steering with the rudder. We don't want to broadside those rocks sticking out over there. Kakashi looked to the nautical steering duo. Thank you for carrying us. It's just business. But I have to wonder why the sleeping one was the one to pay for all of you. Is he the only one trusted to handle the money? He did that because he wanted to take the easiest and shortest route, I believe. We intended to walk around the long way, but when he saw you, he suggested we take a shortcut. That's so. Wake him up then. We're there, anyway. The duo stopped rowing and coasted into the shore where there was a small boardwalk that was meant for disembarking. Sakura and Sasuke hopped off the boat onto this while the Hokage shook Naruto's shoulder. Hey, Naruto. We're here. Let's get going. The boy roused himself quickly and stood up, stretching and yawning. Guess so. Thanks, old man. Anytime. The final two ninjas and Tazuna got off and watched the ferry go off again into the fog. Soon, it could no longer be seen and the travelers continued their journey. Tazuna claimed that it was probably for the best if they just followed the river in case the fog worsened so that they find the way to his home, as he was not much more experienced in such conditions. Naruto looked noticeably agitated when the man mentioned this and Kakashi took notice of it. The river. Do you live fairly close to it? Tazuna nodded. It runs close to the town I live in. If we follow it, getting home is a sure thing. After all, it runs to the sea. There's no other way. Well, if you would rather travel far out of the way while tripping over your own feet, then sure. Kakashi looked between the two, wondering why Naruto didn't like the idea of the river. It was as if he wanted to avoid it. If this is related to him having foresight and wishing to avoid the river, then I need to accept the fact that danger is lurking close to this water body. I could just say we try to avoid it, but it would create some sort of suspicion with the others, like why would we avoid taking an easy alternative? But if he can't predict the future, then it would be a waste, as not everyone can see through the fog as well as I, going merely by the groundless paranoia of one student. But he was getting a feeling. Something felt off. War times taught him to trust his gut. Very possibly, there was danger ahead. They continued walking by the river and Kakashi was torn between his decisions. A shot in the dark. A big gamble. If he's right, and we're making a mistake, then I would be confirming that he has foresight. He's just a genin, and he's got no skill or training to be the way he is now. Confirmation. To what gain? To some unwanted danger. If not, we'll be safe, and he can't predict the future, or at least not 100% accurately. He came to a decision. We'll follow the river. I'll take point. Tazuna-san in the center, Sakura and Sasuke to the sides and Naruto bring up the rear. Yes, sensei. Naruto seemed extremely reluctant and Sasuke noticed. What's the matter? Scared of some water? Don't be stupid. I just got a feeling. That's all. What is it, boy? Tazuna asked, now being put on edge. Premonition or something. Kakashi tried to keep the peace and nerves calm. Now, we'll be fine. There he goes again. He's giving voice to his fears. Am I making the right choice? Sure we will. Some sarcasm leaked into his voice. They continued walking for another 10 minutes, the fog starting to increase in density. All of a sudden Kakashi heard the sound of something cleaving the air heading towards them. He had practically been raised on the battlefield to recognize what that meant. Everyone hit the ground. The genin were mostly caught off guard, but to some extent, they complied instantly along with their sensei. Tazuna, however, was not prepared for such an event. He remained standing. Naruto was crouching on the balls of his feet and grasped the man's ankles and savagely pulled on them towards him. The deed made the man fall flat to his chest and face painfully. The massive cleaver that made its entry out of the fog passed over them all who were lying down, but Naruto, who was crouching, was fortunate enough to only lose a few hairs off the top of his head. The massive blade half cut into the tree behind them and a man appeared on top of it. Naruto spun halfway and stood, as did the others. Now, it was he who was at the front and his sensei at the back, facing a tall man who wore bandages over the lower half of his face that came around his neck as well, akin to a scarf. He was shirtless, but he wore arm warmers and a belt over his chest along with fairly baggy pants with a Kiri-style striped pattern. Hey, you. The man who was scrutinizing the group, in general, focused most of his attention on the golden-haired boy. Do you know what you just did? No one, and I mean no one, is supposed to touch a single hair on my head except me. HMPH. Tall talking brat. Do you know who I am? Kakashi stepped to the fore while ushering Naruto to the side. Momochi Zabuza. Momochi Zabuza. All eyes turned to the blonde again who had announced the name at the same time as Kakashi. The silver-haired man noted that Naruto's reluctance to come this way and his knowing the man's identity had to be good proof that Naruto knew the future. However, the moment was a bit spoilt due to what he yelled next. Yeah, you. Momochi Zabuza. The prick who cut my hair. You think I normally look this good without effort? Tell you what, brat, how about I use Kubikiribocho to take some more off the top? The man said with complete seriousness, hinting that he was going to behead him if he didn't keep quiet. Not wishing to anger the man unnecessarily, Kakashi decided to talk down the man. What's your business with us? We've got no quarrel with you or Kurigakure in general. Oh, but I do. He allowed himself to drop off his sword and with the greatest of ease and took the blade out of the tree by the handle and pointed it at them, holding it completely straight. My business is to kill the bridge builder, and anyone who gets in my way. Overly dramatic, isn't it? The blonde genin's teammates' sweat dropped despite the mess they were now in, and Zabuza growled. Nonetheless, Sharingan no Kakashi, just leave Tazuna where he is, and I won't have to kill the lot of you. Sharingan no Kakashi. He's no Uchiha. How does he have that moniker? Sasuke mused. That's bullshit, Naruto said, all mirth having now left his voice. He was now as serious as a judge. Knowing your background, you'd kill our sensei, even if we did just hand over the bridge builder. Knowing his moniker, you knew of his bingo book entry and you'd kill him just for the extra money, along with fulfilling your original duty as Gato's lackey. What? Oh, don't act surprised. But there's one thing that you should know. And what's that? Kakashi looked to his genin, doubts, and confirmation starting to grow. He discreetly lifted his headband and revealed a red Sharingan eye with 3 toma while the boy continued speaking. You lose. I've won before, and I'll do it again. He yelled while grinning, cracking his fingers very audibly. His gaze leveled with the man's own, neither giving any ground nor showing weakness. Zabuza soon began to chuckle. Weird way to keep up his morale. The others are nervous, but he isn't. Brat, you must be crazy. But if you're not, then you're not far. This is the first time I've seen the likes of you, and there's only one person I've ever fought and lost. The fog grew thicker as it swirled in from the river close by. And you're not him. Naruto said nothing. The fog began to grow thicker than ever before and killing intent washed over the group as the ex-mist nin started to speak, his voice eerily cast all around without a central point. There are 8 vital points. Shut the up and get on with it. No one wants to hear your monologue. Naruto interrupted, frowning like a bull. Kakashi decided that Naruto was getting to be too much of a liability and needed to stop talking. He needed to be able to hear Zabuza stalking them, but the man was a master of the silent killing. That's right. Focus on me first. Forget about Tazuna. You want to kill me first. Right where I want you to be. Momochi lost his patience. Like an unearthly specter, he was behind Naruto and Kakashi and already swinging his massive sword at waist height. Kakashi spun around when he sensed the sword and was already leaping away. Somehow, in the back of his mind, he trusted Naruto to have some trick up his sleeve. He hoped so. He really hoped so. Naruto leaned back suddenly while turning sharply one foot. He did it both simultaneously, and by the time his back was almost on the ground, he was fully turned and was sending a driving toe kick to Zabuza's fingers gripping the hilt. He successfully ducked the massive sword, and in the process, by kicking his hand, the man lost gripping on the massive sword and it swung off into the fog, making a loud noise wherever it had landed. What do you call a swordsman of the mist without his legendary sword? Naruto asked while rolling backward with his elbow over his head and back to his feet. He stared unflinchingly at the man's rage-filled eyes. You call him a moron. The man growled and in a blur, sent a powerful right hook at the boy's jaw which Naruto avoided easily. In the meantime, everyone else was stumped at what the boy just did. Naruto created 10 shadow clones that dashed off into the fog. Soon, their footsteps multiplied and grew thunderous before they faded away. Naruto smirked when this happened. What are you smirking at, brat? He slipped out a kunai from one of his arm warmers and lunged with it at the boy, but Naruto sidestepped it before leaping backward, staying out of the man's range. Kakashi, now sure that he had lost track of whatever's been going on, sprinted to the front of Zabuza and the two men began a bout of kunai fighting, sparks gashing every time their ninja knives clashed. Naruto merely watched them before he spoke again to Zabuza. Nonetheless, Momochi, you should cut your losses and leave. The demon of the hidden mist growled. And why should I? About a week ago, I was carrying some shuriken in a storage seal. But the paper seal tore on accident and I lost it. It was gone. Gone forever. It was brand new shuriken, too, he said poetically. Naruto. This is not the time. Kakashi yelled. Hear me out. So each of my 10 clones created 4 more and there are now 50 of them running around. What's your point, you little? Naruto grinned. One of them has your precious sword in a storage seal. And they are all running in 50 different directions. The man froze. In his error, Kakashi's kunai slipped past his and sliced into his arm, drawing blood instantly. Zabuza quickly jumped back to the river and stood on it, awing the two still watching Genin. Kakashi looked at Naruto out of the corner of his eye. That's good, Naruto. Have them destroy the sword. He started releasing some of his chakra to disperse most of the effects of the fog so they could see more clearly. Naruto folded his arms, hemming, and hawing. Well, the thing is, I don't wanna do that. I can if I have to. But I think I want it. It looks expensive and I could use the money. I'm getting kinda tired of fighting with household supplies, honestly. If you had us going on better paying missions instead of finding that damn cat and cleaning up park rubbish, I wouldn't be second guessing this bullshit now. You think I need my sword to kill you all? You must be dumber than you look. I'll just kill you first so the clones all dispel. They won't get far. He started going through hand seals in a movement so fast they looked like one. Sweden. Jusei. Water release. Gunshot. He spat large globs of water that propelled through the air at high speed, mostly centered on Naruto. The boy dodged them all by, stretching, as if he were limbering up for a long exercise. He did a jumping jack to hop over one, tilted his neck to turn his head to avoid another. Soon, he ducked another to the chest by bending at the waist and touched his toes. Zabuza grew angrier and made a 5-gunshot volley, certain that the boy couldn't avoid it. Naruto saw something interesting on the ground a few feet away and walked over to pick it up, completely evading the jutsu in his casual manner. Oh look, a Ryo coin. You gotta save one to earn one. He gazed over to where Zabuza was stewing in anger. Well, shit. Did I miss something important? Wasn't paying attention, you know. Sorry. Zabuza looked at the area behind the blonde and surveyed the destruction his jutsu had caused, denting trees and rocks and gouging out dirt. The man completely lost it. Needless to say, Tazuna mustered up the nerve to cover Sakura's ears when the long stream of curses spewed out of the man's mouth. Zabuza, having vented his frustration and now worried for his sword's whereabouts, went through more hand seals. Kakashi started going through them as well. After what seemed a long moment, both called out their technique. Sweden. Sweryuden no Jutsu. Sweden. Sweryuden no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon bullet jutsu. 2 large water dragons rose out of the deep river water and each rushed to their foe. In order to save themselves, each man manipulated their jutsus to crash into each other. They both exploded into large deluges of water that threatened to wash away the others. They all fell to maintain a low center of gravity to remain where they were, but they were all ignored. Kakashi, not losing a beat, flashed through 5 hand seals. Raiden. Jaibashi. Lightning release. Electromagnetic murder. Electricity arced from his hand and channeled to the river where Zabuza was still standing. The man, seeing where this was going, leapt off the river to a tree and noted the man's usage of lightning release. I'm severely outclassed right now. I've lost Kubikiribocho and Hitaki uses Raiden. I wonder where Haku is. He eyed Tazuna, still trying to get up off the wet ground. He remembered his original objective and chucked the kunai at insane speeds while resorting to using Jusei to keep Kakashi occupied. Kakashi had to strafe left to avoid the water gunshots, but Tazuna was off to his right. I'm getting too sloppy. Need to save Tazuna, not just my own skin. Not to mention my genin. Should I get Naruto more involved? He seems capable. He threw his kunai at Zabuza's to intercept it, but a high-speed Jusei deflected it by pure chance, just as it left his hand. The ninja knife fell harmlessly to the ground, leaving the bridge builder to gawk at the kunai heading for him. Sasuke steeled himself and stepped in front of the middle-aged man and deflected the kunai to the side with his own. The action made Tazuna and Kakashi sigh in relief, but it made the Nukenin from Kiri fume. He formed the dog handseal and created 10 water clones, and all of them rushed the travelers. Naruto quickly unsealed what looked like 2 large cast iron mugs and held them by the handle. The top part was covered in what looked like black plastic bags as a film. On my way, sensei. Watch me end this, Dadbayo. 6 of the water clones headed for him, 3 for Kakashi and 1 for Tazuna. Sasuke easily took care of his with a fireball after it got occupied with countering some shuriken Sakura had thrown. Kakashi started to move around constantly to avoid getting impaled with kunai, courtesy of the 4 Zabuzas, tearing his eyes away from Naruto and the rest of his charges to focus and keeping himself alive. Naruto didn't mind. The 6 clones ran at him in A, V, formation, and the boy ran at them likewise. Just before he was about to get stabbed by a kunai to the chest, he sidestepped it and struck the clone at its chin with the wrought iron cup while in the same motion, thrust kicking another clone with his right foot, using a thrust kick to the groin. The kick dissipated the clone without much effort, and the Uzumaki found himself having to lean forward and step to keep his balance. The remaining 4 clones, not about to waste such an opportunity, closed in from 4 directions in a perfect X. Sakura gasped as she saw Naruto get stabbed from 4 places, but instead of blood splattering, he poofed away into smoke, revealing nothing but a small blue ball that bounced on the ground briefly. The Zabuza clones stared at the object before they were blown and ripped apart by a tile shrapnel explosion. On reflex, the 2 genin raised their hands over their faces. Substitution. Classic Naruto. Sakura thought. He's never where you want him to be. Sasuke started entertaining the idea of getting more involved in the fight, but he believed he would only get in the way. But no way was he just going to just sit around on the sidelines doing nothing other than just watch. He went through several hand seals, ending on Tiger before bringing his hand to his mouth. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. Fire release. Great fireball technique. He blew a large projectile fireball aimed at where Zabuza and Kakashi and the water clones were fighting. While it traveled, Naruto appeared by jumping out of a nearby tree and started running in the shadow of the fireball. He was a mere 4 feet away behind it, and he kept up the same distance as it made its way to the men. What is he doing? Tazuna wondered. The 2 genin were stumped as they watched the spectacle. The fireball was noticed by the men and each leapt away from the other to avoid it. The 2 water clones who had their backs turned to the fireball in their previous efforts to flank the copy ninja were destroyed, and as the third dodged it, Naruto decked it in the neck with his left cup while tossing the right one to Kakashi, ordering him to catch it. Befuddled, he caught it in his left hand as his right one was gripping a kunai. What is this? The silver-haired man yelled. The boy continued running past before he angled a foot in front of him and skidded on the ground to a stop before joining his sensei's side. The boy didn't say anything but glanced to his own cup repeatedly. Kakashi took the hint and saw what looked like instructions engraved on his. 1. Channel chakra. 2. Point after 4 seconds and hold on tight. 3. Have a nice day. The man was stumped at what it meant until he saw what looked like a small arrow that ran along the side that pointed at the opening of the cup where the film was. Come to think of it, it sounded like something was rattling inside. What the hell happens after 4 seconds? Leave it to him to confuse enemies should he go up against them with these gadgets of his. Wait, 4 seconds. Tags are 5 seconds. Must be an explosive tag inside or something. But why the hell would I hold onto it? It'll kill me. Least of all, take my hand off. The man mused, now alarmed. Naruto. He stared at Zabuza while whispering to the boy next to him. What? Hold onto it, the boy interrupted grimly. You attack first with yours and I'll finish him with mine. He can't block it. He whispered back through clenched teeth to ensure that the mist nin didn't catch on. Go back to the others, Naruto, he said calmly. Trust me. The man hesitated. Did he trust the boy beside him? Dare he trust him? He'd thought of it earlier. The boy was extraordinary and capable. Naruto regularly took him by surprise, and he seemed like he was handling Zabuza and his tactics without much effort. All right. I'm first then. Stand back. He nodded to Naruto before he dashed off to engage Zabuza with his right kunai, with the man, most enthusiastically, agreed to by trying to stab the man in the chest with his. The clash came incredibly easy to the Hokage. With his Sharingan being used, he spotted all openings he could exploit, but the man covered these as best he could. Although Zabuza lacked a lot of experience using kunais to fight, due to using Kubikiribocho instead, he was still a formidable opponent. What's that for, Kakashi? You gonna have a tea party with your brats? The new Kenin taunted. In the same moment, he had to duck the same iron mug before it brained him. Kakashi channeled a little chakra into the cup and started counting down the seconds on his internal body clock. 4. He slashed at the man with his kunai, but the man caught it on the hilt of his and it slid off. 3. As Kakashi rectified his error, he struck the man's knife hand with the mug to disable the man before he got stabbed. 2. The man held on to his kunai, not going to make the same mistake twice and let go of his weapon again. Besides, it was his last kunai. He had it in an iron grip now and stabbed with it at the Hokage, which his antagonist slapped away with the steel covering on his wrist. In the same moment, Zabuza grabbed the man's mug hand which he was attempting to strike him with in the head. 1. Zabuza was incredibly strong by wielding his extremely heavy blade and forced down the man's hand with sheer strength. Kakashi, growing worried that he wasn't going to land a fatal hit, submitted partially, the container now pointing at Zabuza's leg. An explosion erupted from the iron mug and all Zabuza knew was a searing pain in his right thigh. He nearly yelled in agony, but all he let be heard audibly was a stifled grunt and a groan. Blood pooled to the surface in his leg and fell in a pitter-patter to the ground, beginning to paint the ground crimson. Both men glanced down at the injured leg, only to find a multitude of bits and pieces of tile embedded in his leg. Some were below the skin but others protruded, allowing the whole world to see what a gory mess of a leg he had left. Naruto began running to the two men as soon as he heard his creation go off. Zabuza's eyes widened when he saw the boy rapidly approaching with what could now be called the cup of death. Leaping back, he grimaced as pain arced from his leg. Regardless, he still wasn't able to stop the boy from thrusting his mug at him. Instinctively, he raised his arm to protect his chest in a V. In a sudden second explosion, pain once again reigned supreme, but it was now centered in his arm that he used to block. His arm looked shredded and quite a few pieces had gone through in his block into his chest. There, although they drew blood, they were unable to fully pierce and they jutted out from his chest gruesomely. Gah! He glared at the boy and lunged with his still good arm right at the boy's eyes with the kunai. Naruto merely brought back the empty cup in front of his face and caught the knife right into it. The kunai failed to pass through the thick base of the mug and the man decided that enough was enough. He needed to leave, but where was Haku? Tsusenbon took him in the throat and his eyes rolled up to whites. The man toppled over backward, motionless. Without any warning, some other ninja fell out of a tree close to Zabuza and grabbed the man. Before Kakashi could yell for them to stop what they were doing, the two ninjas shinned away. Well, shit. Didn't see that coming. Naruto said, shocked. We won, right?